Thank you. All right, it is 5 o'clock and I'm going to call to order the August 19th meeting of the Quality of Life Committee. And if Jennifer, are you going to help me out tonight? Can you call the roll?
Of course, Chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Here.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Here.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Present.
And Councillor Carol Romero Worth.
I'm here as well.
All right, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Are there changes to the agenda from staff? Jennifer, any changes?
Not tonight.
All right, changes from the committee? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Jennifer, if you could also call the roll on that motion.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Present.
Or approve.
Yes.
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes.
Okay, motion is approved.
All right, moving on to approval of the consent agenda. Are there items that the committee would like to discuss tonight? Oh, and then we'll jump, well, all right, hold on. Approval of the minutes, let's jump back to that one. Are there changes to the minutes from the August 5th Quality of Life Committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Jennifer, can you call the roll again?
Of course. Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
And Councillor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now we can go to the consent agenda. Are there items on the consent agenda that the committee would like to discuss tonight? Or is there
Madam
a
Chair.
motion? to
Madam Chair.
approve?
Madam
Yes,
Chair, I'd like to pull item A.
okay. Is there anything else the committee would like to pull for discussion?
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal?
Also, item A, I'd like to co-sponsor item B as in boy.
Are you pulling that or just co-sponsoring?
Just co-sponsoring.
Okay,
Item F as in Frank, I have some questions. Item H, I have some questions.
okay, so A, F, and H. Other items, Councilor Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd also like to co-sponsor item B as in boy. And then I also had a couple of questions on item H.
H. All righty. If those are the items that the committee would like to approve, can we have a motion for what remains?
Madam Chair, before I'll make a motion to approve the consent, but can I be added as a co-sponsor for item B as well, please?
Okay,
And motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
is there a second?
Second.
Jennifer, can you call the roll again?
Of course. Councillor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councillor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, with that, we will go to the first item pulled, which is item A. I believe we have heard a presentation on this. I think we do have folks on the call if we would like to hear a presentation. But I also know that the counselors have seen this in various places and we may want to just dive into questions. So what's the pleasure of the committee? Are you okay just diving into questions? Okay, so I am not in control of the screen, it looks like. So, well, so if there are questions and you want to raise your hand, let me know. Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank the team for getting us the org chart and the draft mission statements. I really appreciate that. I guess, have one additional request in regards to the org chart, is if we could get it a little more drilled down into staffing structure. I'd like to see, because I know that with the proposed changes, there are new positions being proposed, and I would like to see how that lays out.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
this is Jarrell. May I ask a clarifying question?
yes.
Did you want to see the org chart with just the new positions or the below the departments as well? I think they're two separate.
With the new positions, absolutely. And I also want to be able to see how positions shifted in some senses. So, and I don't want to see an org chart of every single employee, because that's challenging. But I think up to a certain level, maybe up to deputy department directors, division directors, whatever the titles we're going to call them at minimum. I think I want to see it up to, would like to see it up to that level.
Okay.
And so I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, nothing exists, but we can work to get you, there's a number of documents that do exist. I'm thinking back to one of the follow-up from the budget items, which was the one page that showed all of the position shifts.
Okay.
So it may not be as quick of a turnaround as Monday to Wednesday. Let me work on that if I may.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And just as well, if we can include that in the packets in the future, I just want to make sure that the public has the same information that we have. I'm sure they have a lot of the same questions we do, and it will only help to give them clear understanding of what's being proposed.
Madam Chair, on that point,
Yes, Counselor Villarreal.
when was that sent and by whom?
It's sent by Jennifer at about 3 o'clock, I believe.
3:13 p.m. Councilor Villarreal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Counselor Garcia, you still have the floor for questions or other items you're requesting.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair. So one thing that I'm unclear of, I know that we are proposing new positions, but isn't it true we've got a lot of positions we need to fill that are leading to services being somewhat not 100% up to what we should be providing to the citizens? And so, for example, I know we're short-staffed in land use, and I think we're short-staffed in our trash and recycling pickup. So my question is, isn't it prudent of us to fill those positions to provide quality services to our community before we develop new leadership positions?
Counselor Garcia, who are you asking your question of?
I guess whomever is proposing the reorg, so whether that's the city manager, I don't know if the mayor's on with us, but it's whomever's making the proposal, and given that it's the mayor, maybe he can answer that question. If he's on, I don't know if he's on with us.
I don't think the mayor's on at the moment. Jarell, is that something you can?
Yep, he's on the phone, but I can address it and then maybe he can pick up from there. So, and Bernadette, feel free, if I may call on you to clarify anything that I get a little askew. So right now, the reorg proposal that is in front of you contemplates 2 department director positions, the director of community development and the director of community health and safety. The community development director is a new position, but would be utilizing the slot that is the economic development director. So that is not a +1. That is within the existing infrastructure. They're all within the existing infrastructure. The community health and safety would be a new person. It is using a vacant assistant fire chief position. So nothing is adding to the overall number. It is utilizing vacancies. And I think you raise a really important point. We have vacancies across the city. We are short-staffed pretty much everywhere. If you ask any department director, division director on down the line, you will hear about vacancies and short-staffed. I think what is important to acknowledge is in the creation of these departments, sometimes we have to create the right management structure in order to then continue to operate. So it's not an either or, it's a yes and. We need more CDL drivers. We need those positions filled. What the director position seeks to do is create a synergy and an opportunity to reframe the way the work gets done. With that, I don't know if Bernadette, you want to.
If we could, just a minute. I don't have control of this meeting. I don't know if somebody can give me that control, and if we could promote the mayor to a panelist, that would be helpful.
Sure, I just did.
Just got promoted.
Okay, great. Mayor, if you wanted to weigh in here, I think that it might be appropriate.
Absolutely. And whoever promoted me, thank you. I feel very honored to be promoted. It's good to be I think Aaron Burr said it best. It's good to be in the room.
In the room where it happens, not just any old room.
Not any old room, although it didn't end well, but be that. I think, Councilor Garcia raises what is an ongoing issue for our city, which is how do we walk and chew gum at the same time? And there's no doubt we need to fill a lot of everyday positions to make sure that the work that serves the people of the city to the best of our ability gets done every single day. And at the same time, we really do need to have a management structure that can align people so they can succeed at their jobs. I think the most frustrating thing for anybody who is an employee of any organization is to feel like your effectiveness is limited because of the structure and the tools and the resources that are offered to you are not up to what you need to have in order to get your job done. And so I think we got to do both at the same time. I wasn't being facetious when I said walk and chew gum at the same time. We've got to have good management. There is nothing more fundamental to any organization than a professional, modern, effective management structure and resources. If you think back to where we were 2.5, 3 years ago, just in terms of technology, we didn't have the ability to stand up an e-government. And if the pandemic that we're dealing with right now had happened 2 or 3 years ago, our land use department, even if it were fully staffed, wouldn't have the technology at its fingertips to be able to issue e-permits and keep construction and development going. That was a function of good management. And the good management provided the tools so that the employees in land use, of whom we do need more, But the ones we have, we're equipped with the technology and the leadership and the equipment to be able to function in a really importantly effective way. So I think the city manager was right. It's not either or, it really is both and. And if we do one and not the other, we won't have an effective city government. If we do a little bit of each, we'll still be hamstrung. I think we've got to get good management, good alignment, a sense of purpose and mission that really fulfills the value that we're trying to produce, and then the team effectively employed to get the job done with resources, equipment, tools, and a budget so they can succeed.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And
But I think you're
pardon
spot
my,
on. You're right on, Counselor. I mean, your question is really well taken.
and pardon my sports analogy, but sounds, I mean, not sounds like, but we currently don't have a full team to fill the game. And it seems like with what's presented in front of us is we're just adding an additional coach when we need more players. And I think it's critical we figure out how we're going to add more players to the team. That way we can provide the quality services that our citizens want and deserve. You know, for example, last week we passed the short-term rental ordinance where there are more penalties. Well, we don't have enough teammates to go out and conduct that work. So I would like for us to set a plan on how we are going to recruit and get as many great teammates on board as we can. But so I thank you for that clarification. It's my understanding that with this reorg, there will also be the hiring of a deputy city manager. Is that correct? No deputy city manager, nothing like that. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I thought that was floated out there. Just wanted to confirm that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, there is no such proposal at this time. Again, the reorg in front of you proposes the creation of two department directors, community health and safety and community development. One would be new, the other would be an elevation of an existing employee.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that clarification. I guess I just got some quick questions. I mean, technicalities dealing with the proposed changes. And so historically, does the finance director always report through the city manager to the governing body? So in particular, I'm looking at page 4, section 3, line 15. The finance officer shall be responsible and report to the governing body through the city manager.
Aaron, I think, yeah, you might be in the best position to answer that question for Councilor Garcia.
Chairwoman Romero Worth, Councilor Garcia. So basically the ordinance as set out now, all departments report to the city manager, and really the city manager is the employee with whom the council is authorized to work. No directives or requests are supposed to be made to other employees really at all. There's exceptions for making copies and getting information, like requesting information, but in terms of requesting jobs to be completed, it really is supposed to be done through the city manager. So
Okay.
Yes, that is the historic and traditional way, and that's actually the case for all other department heads as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to make sure we're consistent with that. Quick other technical question, you know, on page 28, section A, line 5. I don't understand what department we're talking about. It just says, all requests for the public parks for organized gatherings, including the parking plaza and Plaza Park, as well as concessions supporting these events, may be approved by the department. So is there a department, is it just, do we need to list the department there?
Aaron, I'm going to ask that
just-
you respond to that as well.
Chairwoman Romero Worth, Counselor Garcia, I need to pull up that page, but I think you're referring to the part that was previously Parks and Recreation Department, is that right?
Yes,
And it should say the department authorized to do so by the city manager. Is that not what it says?
yeah,
Okay.
it does. I just
Okay.
didn't know. Okay.
So I think the idea
I didn't know
is
if we
that
needed,
there's other parts to our code that do something similar. And I think because Parks and Recreation is the part where maybe there's going to be an evolving situation, making that absolutely have to come out of a particular department did not seem like the best choice right now. So we left it a little bit flexible. It certainly could be assigned to a particular department, but since I think we're sussing out how it's going to work best, we left it a little bit more flexible.
okay. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate that. And then I guess last little technical question, still on page 28, line 16. Is it the division, should division be the appropriate language, or is it department? Because I think we refer to it a lot here as a department in the document.
So I guess just one thing to, that was a topic that we discussed on Monday as well. For the names of the departments as they're named now, we kept the names as departments. For those that are offices, we kept them as offices. So Office Emergency Management, Office of Affordable Housing. And then for Economic Development Division, it actually is a division in our code. So I just left it as a division. However, they are divisions of the Community Health and Safety Department and the Department of Community Development. So just, they might have a different name than a division, but they are a division. They will be called departments if they're called departments now. So it'll still be a police department, fire department. We're not going to go change every fire truck and every police car. That's the idea behind the proposal, is really that they have those names now. They still are what they are. We're not changing their functions. They're still going to be doing the same things. People will still be calling them probably the same name, but they will become divisions, but they still have the same name.
I understand that, but in the document, it refers to it as a division. So do we need to change it back to what was stricken through prior? Because it refers to it as department, it's stricken through, and then it's replaced with division. Whereas later on in the document, it says it continues with the language of department. So I don't know if we need to change that back.
Okay, I may have misunderstood Counselor Garcia. Let me just make sure I've got the same line as you.
Page 28, line 16.
It's section 15, 26-1.6. In administering the chapter, the Office of Affordable Housing shall work with the Land Use Division to eliminate conflict and duplication in the permitting and development approval process.
Yes, so Chairwoman Romero Worth, Counselor Garcia, then yes, that should be department. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's consistent in the doc. So that's all I have at the moment, Madam Chair. I do have a couple other questions, but I want to yield the floor to my other colleagues.
Okay, do we have other questions? And I just want to say, I should have said this at the front. I do want to try to keep this meeting to 2 hours. You know, we're gonna have another chance to discuss this. I believe that the governing body certainly don't want to shut down any information counselors need now. But just want to make sure that we're moving along. So just want to keep that in everybody's thought process. So anyway, other questions? Counselor Cassett Sanchez.
Madam Chair, City Manager, I don't feel a need at this moment to repeat everything I said at Finance, but I just want to make a request that you have the opportunity to watch the Finance meeting, because I know that there was a lot of questions. Sorry, my cat's in my face. There were a lot of questions that came up that I think you would have been the best person to answer. So just to make that request, as I don't feel a need to rehash it right now, since we already had that conversation.
Yes, and I have, and I appreciate the, I was seeing my kid's school teacher for the first and only time before virtual school starts. So I appreciate the flexibility, and I have watched it, and I took all comments and questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, obviously we'll have another opportunity to discuss it, but I know that they were a little bit more of a piece than could potentially be prepared for tonight, unless you had any updates based on some of those questions that you wanted to provide tonight. Okay.
Nothing specific comes to mind.
I think there was, you did get the email with some of the things you requested,
Yes,
correct,
yes,
Counselor?
I absolutely did. Yes, thank you for sending over the mission statements and the org chart. That was very much appreciated and very helpful for me as I tackle this and have that visual. So thank you for getting that to me today.
And I do want to say on the mission statements, I think, you know, these are very much draft, a work in progress. As, you know, if this moves through and gets approved, I think, you know, the creation of a mission statement is a really important piece of work. You're taking existing operations, creating, you know, proactive mission and vision. And I think that is important work that takes time, not, you know, over the course of, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. And so I think that's a really, I think as we, you know, as we get clarity on what's moving forward, then we can really do the important work of making sure that those are tight and cover all of the bases. I think, again, those are a really important starting point, but there's more work to be done there.
And just to Councilor Garcia's point about the staffing question, which I think is a very good question. I think I would say that I would have a bit more hesitancy about adding new positions, or I guess hiring the one new person if it didn't have to do with the public safety piece, because that has been such a huge community conversation. And I think that's something for us to think about if we can really undertake this shift that we're hoping to make in public safety, a new approach to public safety. I think if we get the right person in there, they could be a really big asset. Because for me, that feels like just such a big shift that we're looking for. But I think that that's a very, you know, something that to be very cautious of as we are moving forward with coming out of COVID world is how are we identifying where are we going to be filling positions, and how might this reorg, if we pass it, how would that potentially change some of those positions? So that's something else that, you know, maybe to think about, Jarrell, over the next week until governing body, that I'd like to revisit at that time, because I'm curious how this could potentially impact some of the, and hopefully help some of our COVID recovery if we were to move forward with this. So yeah, I think that you look confused with my question. Yeah, I think just thinking about how we are restructuring and what this is going to do in terms of what we are delivering and what we need to be delivering at this time, and how that is potentially going to change how we move forward. And I'm sorry, I do have one other question. You know, some of the emails that we've been getting is this concern of additional bureaucracy, and that this is going to slow down our processes. And I would like to hear a little bit more about that, about how this new structure would envision work being done, how there being a layer between yourself and some of our current department managers. How do we envision that this isn't going to slow things down in terms of approvals, in terms of those important conversations? What will that look like?
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett Sanchez, I will take that. And so I think what's really important, and we've acknowledged this before, is the right level of management actually makes things move faster, not slower. And part of our struggle right now is we don't necessarily have the right level of management. And so I think, you know, one example I'll use to try and illustrate. So we put together on the calendar, this was pre-COVID, a weekly meeting around homelessness and housing. So brought together all of the right divisions, to address a issue that is, crosses silos, right? That works across it. It's police, fire, community services, the whole like. It became because there's a number of issues that cross, so we have the weekly meeting that I run because who else is going to run it? What came out of that was the creation of this encampment policy, because it was an issue that we needed to work tightly on. It took us upwards of 12 weeks to get it done because we're working week by week. Everybody's working in their own space, and we come together. We have a community health and safety department, right, in which a bulk of the work is being done. You've got somebody who's able to drive that on a day-to-day level or weekly, but that is able to push some of these proactive policies that we are in so desperate need of. And that would allow it to come together that much faster. You've got somebody driving it. You've got then myself, the city manager, others, the city attorney who can weigh in, but on a lot of this stuff where we're not just doing triage, where we're not just making day-to-day decisions, that's where I think things will actually move a lot faster to really push us forward. So I don't think it's not an added level of bureaucracy. I think what we're doing is creating, again, finding synergies, creating a level of opportunity to really, the team is remarkable and works really well together across boundaries on our own. But when you've got additional folks with bandwidth who are, again, we're all split between the day-to-day, right? The day-to-day incoming, the emails, the questions, the concerns from constituents, and the proactive planning and the really more visionary work that also needs to happen. And so you got to do both. But I think where you've got, certainly on the community health and safety, you've got somebody looking across all these lines, we're going to make progress that much faster.
Thank you. I appreciate hearing that example. That was helpful. And it sounds like a lot of our day-to-day operations, for example, land use, will keep moving along as they've been moving along in terms of the things that we know are working well. Okay, great. All right, thank you. I will yield the camera.
And Councilor Casa-Sanchez, I just also would interject that the good governance initiatives that we're working on should also help, and that we'll be bringing forward hopefully soon, should help move things along and make sure we don't get stymied in bureaucracy, and that we're lean and doing some things that keep
if I may, one other thing, I think, one of the biggest frustrations on things like medians or where you've got a number of crews, it's like, well, who's got that or who's doing this? What this reorg is, again, trying to do is make sure that is to increase our level of effectiveness. And so we don't have two teams showing up at the same time. You don't have a parks crew and a streets crew showing up at the same job when we've got, we know acres of medians of weeds that need to be cleaned. And so I think really being clear, again, instead of having to go through this complex matrix, well, you cover this part and you cover this part and you cover this part. We've got one crew who covers it all. And I think that's really important and also sort of decreasing the frustrations of our teams too, right? Bureaucracy is not just too much management. It's a lot of times when there's no clear direction as to what happens. And I think that's really important, particularly on the park side, right? Where they're going to be, if this is approved by the governing body, a division in public works, you've got access. You are now part of the same team to solve across many of these sort of continual ongoing issues that we face. So with that, I'll yield.
Thank you. All right, I'm not sure. I think Councilwoman Villarreal, I think you had your hand up next, so I'll go to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We asked a lot of questions during finance that I won't repeat necessarily. There's still concerns I have. And Counselor Garcia, you bring up questions that I was asking about and concerned more about the vacancies and the hiring freezes and what that looks like for us. And that to me is the bigger issue. And the fact that our staff are going through these tumultuous times with furloughs and dealing with the pandemic, working from home, and these kind of changes are not easy to deal with for any of us. And so I just think this other layer of like change or drastic change is a big deal and shouldn't be taken lightly. I guess I'm of the mindset of taking things more incrementally, and this to me does not take that approach at all. And so that's what I've been struggling with. And not all the changes I'm opposed to. There's some that really make sense to me. I'm just wondering why we like package it all in one piece. And I know it's part of the ordinance, but I still think there's ways to do things incrementally so that we can evaluate the process and then how things are fitting together instead of loading it on and saying, these are all the changes all at once. So that's what I've been struggling with. And I think in the next phase or the next time we get to talk about this, which will be council, is just really understanding how staff came to what their process was of vetting this idea initially and what their methodology was and how they got staff involved at all levels to understand what this could look like and get their input. And so I'd like to know that, maybe not necessarily now, because we have another chance to talk about it. Because I think, I think I said this in the budget hearing about progress, and progress requires change, but not all change is progress. So I'm really liking to take, especially reorgs, taking things slowly. And a lot of the decisions we've been having to make have been really fast forward, quick emergency style changes and decisions. And partly it's because of the pandemic and the economy. And so there's a lot of factors in there, but I guess I see there's opportunities to be able to work across departments without necessarily having a reorg. And Councilor Garcia, I was also the one that brought up, why didn't we consider a deputy city manager? We had talked about that idea in the past. And I've never been opposed to that. It was usually a budget issue. But now if we're looking at a potential new director and other changes, I still think that was a piece that we've been lacking for a long time. And we had talked about it in finance, and one of the counselors had said, well, we need two. Well, okay, maybe we do need two, but I would like to start with the deputy at least to see how that works for the city manager office. So if we had money to budget for anything, I would rather see that. So I don't know if that's where you heard a rumor about deputy city manager, but I'm not opposed to that idea. And I guess I didn't see the attachment. I just saw it now, so I'll look at that. The other thing is this ordinance is extremely messy in terms of the technical changes that need to happen. I talked about them a little bit for finance and during the finance meeting, and I'm seeing more. And so I'm wondering how to get those to you all, because regardless of how this goes, there's a lot of changes, technical things that need to be changed on that ordinance. It's messy. And there's some language in there that's old language from how the Affordable Housing Office was structured. It was under another umbrella, and there's still language that's lingering that we haven't changed yet that has to do with that. So I don't know what the best method is to get that to staff, at least those pieces, the technical changes. And maybe the city attorney can respond to that.
Aaron, can you respond to that?
Yep. Chairwoman Romero Worth, Councilor Villarreal, please send them to me and Jesse.
Okay, will do. I guess in a Word document, is that the best way?
It could be Word or email, either way is fine.
Well, I think it's hard to see where they're at. It's better to maybe just show you through track changes. So I'll send that to you all by the end of the week, I hope so. to get those done, because they're things that should have just been changed a long time ago. And so I'm glad that staff picked up on some of them as we worked through the adjustments with the reorg in this case. So I'll send those to you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Rivera. Oh, wait, Jarrell, did you? Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted answers to any of your questions, but I can.
In terms of the vetting methodology and all that, I think it would be good for all the counselors to hear that instead of just this committee. So maybe that's something we wait till we're all together, or I don't know. I don't think it was addressed in the FAQs. And then your thoughts. I mean, I don't know if you want to share now about the potential of a deputy manager, but I mean, I'll leave it up to you. That was just something that's been lingering for a while in discussions that we've had around that topic.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I did want to just acknowledge your comment about sort of progress and change for progress sake, and how that all fits together, because I think it's really, it's the moment, right? I will say that we were talking about the reorg well before the pandemic hit, and a lot of the conversations around community development and how do we work together better, leverage our resources, even when things were booming and things were growing really well, we started having that conversation. And the reality is it's really hard. So, right, it's sort of back in January, it was like, oh, is this, is this too hard? Change is really hard. I think what I think is what we tried to do in this proposal is we're moving boxes. So we're trying to limit the impact on as much of the rest of the operation as possible. So by moving the boxes, we're impacting directors very, very much so. But those that are under them are a little more protected. And so we're moving these boxes. We're not opening the boxes. We're not unpacking the boxes yet. That would be phase 2, or as we see how this goes. But we're really, most folks will not be directly impacted. Their day-to-day manager, their day-to-day operations will not be dramatically impacted. And I think, again, the city has been through a remarkable amount of change in the last 2 years. And finding the balance between sort of pushing through these uncertain times and getting to the other side, getting to a new shape of an organization, while also really respecting that these are, this is everybody's daily livelihood, daily job, and how many processes can we change? How much can we do? But I think it's a resilient group of people. I think the experience of going through ERP, the challenges we faced with Munis, the heartache and heartbreak, right? That was hot. That was hard. And here we are. And there's still challenges to face, but that getting to the other side of that allowed us to be able, we're turning things around faster. So I think I hear you loud and clear. I think it's, again, it's a both and, but what we really try to do with this reorg, and again, it's, 3 big buckets, the creation, community health and safety, community development, and the separation of parks and rec to align for a tighter work product. I think really I'm not minimizing the impact of the change, but we're not moving all sorts of different things. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you for adding your input on that. I think it's interesting. You say we are moving boxes, but I do remember the mayor saying during the budget hearings, we're not moving boxes. We're not just moving boxes. So I'm not sure how to take that.
Well, I think, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the intent, these are people, these aren't boxes. It's humans. That's the part. But in terms of the operation, we are moving an entity as a whole into another thing. We're not unpacking an entity and moving its parts. I guess I should say it that way.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. In some cases, the day-to-day management will not change. And then there's some that will be significant. And so that's where I'm kind of staying. Like, there's some that I think are going to be fairly easy. It's not going to change for certain departments that will become divisions. It's just there's others that they seem so top heavy. And so I'm just trying to figure out, I wish we could vote on them separately. That's what I'd like to see, but that's my opinion. That's all I have. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, moving on, Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam City Manager, are we doing this reorganization because of the budget shortfall? Or is it the budget shortfall that created this response in order to provide better services? Or is it a combination?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, thank you for the question. I think it's both. Like I mentioned earlier, we've been talking about a reorganization for a while, even since I was interim city manager and then became officially city manager in January. We were seriously looking at a reorg. So that was well before any of the budget crisis happened, any of COVID, and before we knew when we were growing big and strong, there was still this need for an organizational shift. I think now, though, as we were going through the really hard choices with the budget, it forces creative thinking. And I think that's where being able to, when we're down but not out, how do we take this as an opportunity to really restructure the way the city provides services to its residents? And it gives us a chance to say, okay, is this the best model for this level of service, or is there a different model? I think now, as we are seeing, probably certainly a year of uncertainty, what's the right way to provide the most, direct aid to those in need? What's the right way to, invest in infrastructure or create some, recession area spending so that we're not back and forth. So the short answer is it's both. We wanted to do this before the budget crisis, and I think now with the budget crisis, it's even more imperative, because if we just keep cutting and adding more needs, the requests don't stop. But if we can reshape the way that the work gets done, then we can continue to provide as close to the level of service, or being very clear about what we can no longer afford to do, or that it's best that this is not a city function, that it is a partnership with an outside organization. So the short answer is it is absolutely both.
Okay. And then I think I had spoken to your predecessor as well as you before, and I think currently you manage up to 12 managers, and the reorganization will cut it down to 7, which I think falls better in line with best practices. Is 7 a manageable amount for you? And does it, I assume it'll make things easier for you?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, thank you. It's actually 17 right now. And you're right, it would take it down to 7. I think that is, in any sort of incident command, the span of management control is 7. No good management operation says you can manage directly any more than that. And I think, I've been very open and honest with all of you. I think what the city manager does right now is triage. It's not a direct management. You can't do that when you've got 17 direct reports and it's really, 21 on a staff meeting. You handle the incoming. And again, what this will allow us to do is move faster, move forward more tightly. And I think, again, acknowledging that this is not the be all and end all, it's 7 direct reports with still the access and direct conversation with others. I will still be very involved with the police chief and the fire chief and the land use director. I think this is really around, but being able to have bandwidth again to sort of drive things forward. This one person can only do so much.
And do you think this will allow, I'll bring up the police chief and the fire chief, to really focus on their departments and not focus so much on really dealing with the city manager and management.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera. Yeah, I think what's interesting is it allows, there's, again, we've talked about this, there's the day-to-day operations and then there's some of these big picture cross-cutting issues. And it's really, everybody has to do both, but it's really hard to do both. And I think I won't speak for either chief, but in our conversations, they've both expressed interest and excitement in being able to focus on their day job, the day-to-day operations, and that if this proposal moves forward and we've got a director of public health and safety, that's the person who's really, again, looking across the departments, working to create these policies, thinking about where the through lines are with our budget. How do we build a better MIHO? How do we make sure that we're the right people are responding to the right calls? I mean, you guys know there's no end in to the work. There's a lot of progress to be made, and it's really that balancing act. So having somebody who can really drive that forward is exciting. I think it elevates all of us to be able to provide better service to our residents.
All right, one final question. So I was interested, and I think I've heard others saying that they're interested in like a 6-month review of this. But thinking on it while I'm listening to my colleagues answer questions, that really puts us around April. And at that point, we'll be discussing the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So do you think there's really a need for some type of review, or do you think it'll just happen as a result of discussing the new budget?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I think a review is important, and I think we've acknowledged, again, that this is a work in progress. I think your timing is right, though. It will be right around the budget, which is actually we brought the reorg as part of the budget in the first place because that was the request in April of last year, right? That it's all sort of part of the context, that part of what the governing body ultimately votes on is the budget, but it's part of a bigger picture. So I think it actually could work really well if we did it as part of the budget. I've been told by others in the past that reorgs have not really ever been standalone. They've always either come forward as part of the budget or been like a particular item. I don't know how that tracks with you all's experience, but I am, look, I think we're gonna, the budget this year is going to be very iterative. We're gonna be looking at things on a quarterly basis. So I think as part of the budget, seeing how this reorg is going and getting council input and review, I think is really important. And I would be amenable to that.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam City Manager.
Great. And we'll go Councilor Garcia for a second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to kind of reemphasize what Councilor Villarreal brought up in regards to, the background info justification for this proposal, and any data that you have to support it. Quick question in regards to that was, I know that there had been some focus groups established. Were those focus groups part of this planning process? And if there
Madam
was,
Chair.
who are we at liberty to, tell the public who these focus groups members were?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, we did, we put out the call to start them. We never, we actually, in the effort to redo the budget, we got responses from folks who wanted to participate. We haven't actually convened the first meeting of those. The intention is still to do so. I think as we're continuing to go forward. So we've got the recommendations of folks who want to participate, but we didn't convene that first meeting yet.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. And to go back to the position with the community development, proposed new community development, you had mentioned that that would be led by an existing staff member. Wouldn't we have to fill the position that existing staff member would leave? So in essence, it still would create a new position, a new hire?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, the plan is to not fill the Economic Development Director position at this time, so it would not be an additional expense.
So
It
who would
be a dual
carry out,
role.
so the newly hired person would carry both? Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I mean, I guess the way I see this reorganization is this is really a beginning. And maybe that's what Jarell means when she says we're moving these boxes, and there's so much more work that's going to have to come after we approve this. And, you know, I think some of the mission statements will have to be developed, trying to figure out how we work. I mean, particularly the department that's going to look at police and fire and community services, and how do we best meet the community needs, looking across those players. It's really the leadership, and they're going to figure out kind of the vision and how best to use our resources and the talents among and across the variety of groups that we're bringing together, divisions that we're bringing together. And then, you know, that from there will actually, I think, trickle down kind of what the staffing needs are. And, you know, do we have too many here and not enough here? And as our revenues improve, how do we prioritize where we add? So I see this as, you know, we're not going to solve the city's problems with this one vote on this one bill and this one reorganization. I think, you know, it is change. I think it's a good time for change, and we'll continue to massage it or tinker with it or adjust it, whatever analogy you want to use as we go forward. So just throw that out. Mayor, you just popped back in.
Well, because I wanted to build on what you just said, and I think you're right. I think I also wanted to compliment you for raising some of the good governance proposals that you've been working on with others on the council. I think this is all part of an ongoing process. This is not new. It's not, it's not an extraordinary sudden adventure. I don't know how many of you may have heard from Councillor Abeyta, a story that he told me when he was running for office. He went in to see the then city manager, Brian Snyder, who showed him a reorganization plan that Brian and then Mayor Gonzalez had been working on at the time. So I think for some time there's been a recognition that in everything from advanced technology and the implementation of the ERP system to the improvements in our overall land use operation, to the purchasing, the adoption of a more professional purchasing approach. You could make a list of the ways in which over the last few years, incremental positive improvements have been made, very steady, some below the radar screen, most of which residents wouldn't even know about because it's inside city government. It's not at the point of contact with our residents. It's trying to modernize and professionalize and improve the way we operate as a city government. Your proposals in terms of governance are another example of that. They're not extremely public facing, but they will make the implementation of contracts, for example, happen more quickly, which will lead to services being delivered more effectively. So I see this as an incremental, ongoing process. Was advanced by the prior administration in some form, and it really does provide evidence that the government is a living organism. We're a living entity made up of the people who work in it, and so we're not unmindful of. We're only as good as the people and the leadership in the organization, trying to meld that into a more effective structure. And I think the city manager made a really good point about in answering Councilor Rivera's question about, was this a product of the COVID-led recession or not? And the answer truly is it's both. And it's also, I think, another example of ways in which we're trying to make a very difficult time present opportunities rather than simply downsizing. It is one step that cities across America have taken when they're faced with revenue shortfalls is simply to cut. And our model instead has been to reimagine. We have not cut, we've not laid people off, we've not cut positions, we've not reduced payroll. We've tried to maintain and provide stability at the same time that we reimagine a structure so that in a variety of departments, we'll have an integrated approach to health and safety, which is very much an important undertaking. It is a nationally important undertaking. At the same time, quality of life, which your committee is really fundamentally about, involves neighborhood livability, job opportunities, job training, economic diversification, the integration of arts and culture into the lives of people, the implementation of the Culture Connects plan. And I believe that pulling pieces into a better shape, reimagining how the shapes work together, is a constructive, creative, and entrepreneurial response to a moment in time where it's really opportune to step into a more an additional change process, understanding that it's not done, it's just a beginning and a continuation of work to make the government function better, more responsively and more responsibly. So it's an ongoing activity, and we're all doing it collectively. We're all part of it.
You know, as you speak, Mayor, it reminds me that this isn't even really the beginning. If you really want to go back some, arguably the beginning was when the City Charter Review Commission was constituted under the last mayor to look at the governance structure of our mayor and our governing body and how all of that works, and making you full-time. And again, with this eye towards professionalizing for growing, having the city's governance structure grow up to meet the 21st century city that we actually are. So, this is just the next phase, if you will, of that continuing work. And it happens at many levels, and reorganization, it seems to me, is a natural next step after after the voters approved making you full-time, and you're our first full-time mayor, and how that all has evolved. So just throw that out there too. All right, I'm not gonna, I was trying to keep us on schedule. We've got a lot still to talk about. If we have further questions on this, we could do that, or I'd consider a motion to approve this ordinance.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Jennifer, can you call our roll?
Of course. Councillor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Councillor Chris Rivera,
Yes.
Councillor Michael Garcia,
Yes, I'll still see it next week, so yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal,
I'll abstain for more reconnaissance.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. Okay, so with that, let's see if we can get through these other consent agenda items fairly quickly so we can move on to our honored guests who are here, mostly staff, but still happy to have them here. I believe Counselor Villarreal, you pulled off item F. Do you want to go to that?
Hold on a minute. I'm in tech mode. PrimeGov is a little slow here.
Yeah, so F would be request for approval of contract amendment number 2 with Lou Hammond and Associates in the amount of $125,000 for public relations services for FY21.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So let's see. I know this is a regular, this is just an amendment to an existing contract. And what I was trying to understand, in the memo, it says the service fees would remain the same, and then the annual amount of 5,000 of out-of-pocket expenses. And I'm wondering if Mr. Randall could explain that, because in the contract, it still says 10,000 for out-of-pocket expenses, but your memo says 5,000. So I'm wondering where we need to make that change.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, there are actually two amendment number 2s. The first one was at 130,000 that had the legal approval, and then, but for the budget purposes, we reduced it from the 130 to 125. And we were instructed by purchasing to do a second contract amendment number 2 that reflects the 125 that we're requesting. So the first one at 130 was included just to show that there was legal review of the form of the contract, but that the amount of 125 is the correct amount.
Okay, so is that due to the out-of-pocket expenses change? Was that the main adjustment?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that is the total change. It was just reducing the out-of-pocket from being 10 to 5. We found that they weren't often using the full amount of 10 anyway. And with the reduced travel we anticipate on the part of press, we may not even actually use the full amount of the 5. The fixed part of this contract is the 10 per month, the $120,000. And the 5 is just available if in fact we need to use it for press coming in.
So that out-of-pocket expense is specifically for the coordination around press trips? Or what does it entail?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, it would be for press trips coming in, or it would be if they incurred any expenses on our behalf. They operate out of New York, is the office that we work with. And so if they do any work on a pre-approved basis, that 5,000 could be used for their services as well in New York.
Okay, but I guess I'm thinking the reduced out-of-pocket amount is due to the fact that there will not be press trips, in this case, due to the pandemic.
Chair, Councilor Villarreal, there won't be as many. We still will be able, we hope, in the spring to have some press trips to be able to, but these are one-on-one press trips. We probably won't have a group press trip, but it would be individual press coming in.
So you foresee that actually picking up again, even though there's no travel right now?
I certainly hope so.
Okay. That's all I have for that item.
Okay, are there other questions on this item? If not, can we get a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Jennifer, can you call the roll?
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Councilor Chris Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, so with that, we will now move Counselor Villarreal. I think you also pulled H.
Yes,
And-
yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is for the contract with Vladimir Jones. And so again, it's similar to what I was trying to figure out for the last item, and because of the pandemic, what adjustments the company's making that's shifting their work. And I saw on page 11 of the document, there's a line item again for 5,000 for travel. However, no travel's occurring, so I'm just curious why that wasn't adjusted down. And then if there was any other deliverables that will change due to the pandemic for this particular contract.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, good questions. The whole contract is down from $1.5 million last year. So there's $200,000 reduction. I'm not sure about the $5,000 travel in this, but that would be to cover any visits that the team makes. They come down from Denver. And once we are allowed to have business travel into the state again without a 14-day quarantine, it's important that we have them come down once or twice, the team come down from Denver to visit with us one-on-one as opposed to the Zoom meetings and to strategize. So that would be, that allocation is for that. Overall, we have advertising on hold right now. And we have about a $30,000-$40,000 expenditure being done for just awareness to keep the name of Santa Fe out there in the public, but and it's mostly being done through social media. Our plans are on hold. It's a rolling hold. As soon as we can have people come into the state without the requirement of a quarantine of up to 14 days, we will kick it off and begin marketing again to try to get people back in our hotels. We ran in July, we ran 33% occupancy for the city as opposed to 78% the prior year. June, we were at 40% when the quarantine wasn't in effect for the drive traffic. We were at 40%. And we were going to see a build, we felt, during the summer. But so we will hold these dollars and be able to make a stronger restart using the dollars that would have been spread out more over the year.
Council.
Got it. Sorry, it's been my trend today for some reason. Can you tell me more about the $200,000 reduction? What that was about? Why that was decided?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the reduction was just done. This is all that could fit in our budget.
Okay.
We actually reduced our budget wherever we could, and then built our advertising dollar back up to what would fit in the budget. So if we could have put in $1.4 million, I would have put in $1.4 million, but $1.3 million was what would fit into the budget. And it will come out of just some reduced areas of advertising that the agency does that either would have been experimental. We're all the time trying to experiment with new sources to generate business. And so we're really focusing in on the stuff that worked historically very well this past year to ensure that we get the biggest bang for the dollar that we'll be spending.
So that reduced areas of advertising due to the pandemic, and you said that advertising has been on hold. How come the contract isn't set up so it's based on work performed, or like on a kind of pay by, I don't know what you'd call it, instead of like a lump sum, that you'd base it on the work performed because of the volatility of the market and what's happening?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the contract that we have with the agency, I think it specifies about 295,000 or 290,000 of the total $1.3 million is the agency fees for the work that they do, which includes the creative, it includes the buying, it includes the tracking of the advertising. The balance is all pass-through funds that are spent for the actual sources of advertising. 80% of that is, as in the past, is actually it's a little higher now. It's about 82% is digital, and the amount of print ads is down to very minimal because they require more lead time. And what we didn't want to end up with was a print ad in the Dallas magazine in the month of September when Texas can't come to Santa Fe. So we've tried to make it so that the way the dollars are going to be spent are the most flexible and the most versatile. And that's where the digital comes in. Very little out of home advertising. Almost 82%, I think it is, that's digital.
Okay.
And when they buy these ads in the digital, because they can be tracked, we're guaranteed a certain number of exposures. And if in fact the amount of advertising that they buy from any particular source doesn't gain those number of exposures, the ads just keep running until we at least get to the committed amount of exposures. So going in, we know that there's going to be a certain level of success, and that success, because it's digital, can be measured. Again, with a print ad, there's absolutely no way to measure the success of that print ad, which is why we keep going less and less with it. The only print we're doing now are in proven city markets: Dallas, Phoenix, Denver, Colorado Springs, and maybe, I think actually, I correct that. In Texas, we're using Texas Monthly because it hits the big cities: Austin, Dallas, Houston, and Fort Worth, as opposed to, it would be more expensive to go into the specific city markets of those four. And Austin is a booming market for us when we get back in business.
Yeah, that's actually very helpful to explain that explanation. Remind me what page that breakdown that you just described was. I can't find it. Do you remember what page it was that had the breakdown of what went to their like creative?
Well, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, in the original document, it was page 3 of that contract. I don't know I don't have the page number in your packet, but that was based on
I think it's page 11.
Page 11.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. I think that was actually the questions I had about that particular item, because the breakdown, I was trying to understand that large chunk goes to them. I think it's actually 300. What is it? I still don't see it on that page for some reason. What's the amount for the?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, it's 302,500, but that's actually 290 now, I believe.
Okay.
Again, this was based on the $1.6 million, and the actual amendment is based on $1.3 million.
Got it.
Because
Okay.
we've reduced the contract.
Right. Thank you for the clarity. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, Councilor Rivera, I think you had questions on this item as well.
Yeah, just thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Randall, just to follow up on where Councilor Villarreal was going. But if there's a chance that COVID continues and we don't expect visitors for half of next year. Does the contract allow us to save on that 1.3 million, or is it going to be spent out regardless?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, very good question. The commitment to them on their fees for the efforts they're putting in would remain. But obviously all of the advertising, if we don't approve the expenditure for advertising, it won't happen. So about $1 million of that $1.3 million is flexible.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Okay, is there a motion on this item?
Move to approve.
Second.
Jennifer, can you call the roll?
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Chris Rivera,
Yes.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, so we are down on to presentations. We are going to start with our Economic Development Director, Rich Brown, on the Santa Fe Promise COVID-19 campaign update. Hi.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm going to pass this on to Liz Camacho and our team. She's been driving the Santa Fe Promise and COVID-19 outreach campaign, and then I'll speak to the broadband piece.
Great. Take it away, Liz.
Certainly, I'm just looking for the presentation so I can put it up on the screen. And in the interest of time, Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I think I'll go into about a 5-minute, 6-minute presentation overview. And if all of the counselors, as we would very much like to have your input, could jot down their ideas, and then maybe we can dedicate, after we go over the presentation, to some of your thoughts and interjections of how we can improve the Santa Fe Promise and the outreach that we're planning.
Great.
Can you see my screen?
No, not at this time.
Is the screen available now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. So Santa Fe Promise, we're going into a second phase of it. And what we'd like to do is really address the increase in COVID cases, especially in the 87507 zip code. But first, I'll just go over what have we done.
I'm sorry. So we can see the screen, but I'm only seeing a sliver. Should I be seeing words?
Yes, you should be.
Okay, not seeing any words.
Okay.
I'm seeing half of the sentence, not the full sentence.
Yeah, it looks like it's oversized for the screen somehow.
Still oversized for the screen?
Now we are seeing text messages. There we go. It looks good now to me.
Okay, excellent. So first what I'll go over is what we have already done. So what have we done at the moment for the Santa Fe Promise? It's really been this very cross-collaborative team effort. It's been led by land use, and we've been supported by tourism, by constituent services, and arts and parks. Arts and the Parks Department as well. Primarily what we focused on previously is emergency service provided masks So we've handed out about 18,700 free masks. Flyers. The flyers consisted of the Santa Fe Promise, 20,000 rack cards that also consisted of the Promise. Most of these were delivered by a lot of our partners, since we've been working closely with the food distribution and food security groups. So you'll see we partnered with Food Depot, Kitchen Angels, Indian Center, World Central Kitchen. And then we also made them available at the libraries, at the tourism center, and as well at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Green Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce. And then we personally went out and delivered to businesses on Airport Road, as well as the hotels on Cerrillos Road, and the hotels and the restaurant association as well. Because at the time when we first started this, we were very much concerned about people coming into Santa Fe and not being aware of our values and how we are approaching COVID. From there, and one of the things that I think is really impressive, and you'll hear a little bit more as well from Armenia, is that we managed to get a lot of pro bono work, whether it was radio, whether it's digital, whether it's from santafe.com. We had a lot of local people who helped us, whether it's K Suave, Hutton Media, Ideas and People, who helped us with the graphic work of it. And then we also had Facebook posts that our constituent services group get across, and the mayor, who promoted the Santa Fe Promise as well. So it was a kind of a cross effort between making sure we got to our community and businesses with the mask and with the Promise. What we've seen is in the spike, and specifically we spoke with the New Mexico Department of Health. One of the things that we saw, they had a map. I can't get the map because it's not public access, but where we saw a big spike were 87507 and 87505. We specifically looked with them at the 87507 area, which was Agua Fria Village and surrounding areas. And what they told us was, well, first we had looked at it as we'd known there's a spike. We kind of looked at what's the makeup, what's the demographics. I won't go into the demographics, but I think that what we saw with the New Mexico Department of Health very much confirmed what we would see even before COVID. And what it is that we have a high vulnerability index in 87507. When we have a high vulnerability index, this means not only for COVID, but any kind of natural disaster, any economic disaster would particularly impact this community. And it's because of certain things, certain qualities that they have that would make them more vulnerable. So some of the things I'll speak to are the qualities that the New Mexico Department of Health went over, which was, one, we have a lot of Spanish speakers. A lot of the COVID information is predominantly in English. There are high levels of poverty. We're talking about people who use public transportation, who may not have very many cars. I think we also, not cars, maybe even one car. So that also means that you don't necessarily have the access to different things. And I think that we've heard that as well from our food security partners, where they're saying, you know, sometimes people stop coming because as you were restricted in terms of budget, you may not have been wanting to pay the gas, pay the bills on the car. And so you stop necessarily going out to some of the food banks that were offered. What we also see is that some of the populations that are most vulnerable, either people who are over the age of 65 or under the age of 18, or people with disabilities, tended to be in this area. We have families that are intergenerational, that are living in close proximity. This close proximity, this density, it really accelerates with COVID, the contagion rate. I think what we've also be seeing is the crowding, because this is predominantly in apartments, in mobile homes, in nursing homes, in densely populated areas. And so people don't necessarily have the resources as well, or the knowledge on quarantine. And the biggest thing is obviously because of the levels of poverty is the lack of resources. What are the implications for us in this? We have lack of access to unemployment, no place to quarantine for people. We have lack of broadband access. So for us, what some of the learnings that we took home are that we needed to be much more culturally relevant in our messaging, something visual, and we need to provide educational material. In terms of the levels of poverty, the services and information should really be brought to them. And we need to also think about targeting the areas where young people might be. And so we need to think of what kinds of things that we can do to reach out to young people. And because of the crowding and the areas that we're talking about, one of the things that was recommended is maybe we need to start canvassing and going door to door, and need to think about going beyond digital and how is it that we might be able to get masks or disinfectants and inform people on resources. There are various speculated causes for the spike. I'm not going to go into them, as I think one of the key things that we're proposing is how can we work with our local community organizations and hear directly from the people who are affected, and perhaps conduct focus groups with them so that they can give us a better idea, as opposed to us talking or us deciding solutions for them telling us what some of the solutions that are have. But nonetheless, we do want to take action. So we've developed a plan, and our plan really takes into consideration, and especially with the focus groups, is do we need to start generating greater equity and need to think of these areas of how do we get them into on the same level as in the same resources that you might have if you were more of a middle-class family. So our communication objectives overall is we want to educate people. We want to continue generating awareness of the promise. We want to define what it means to do quarantine, provide what the resources are. A lot of the information from the New Mexico Department of Health, really, it exists online, but I think we need to find a way, maybe a booklet, to get it to people, and we need to get it in Spanish as well. One of the big things we want to do is make sure people are doing contract tracing. So we want to promote the NOVID app. And as I mentioned earlier, collaborate with our local community groups. And if we find the funding, Eli helped us apply for the NM CARES Act funding. And so he put a proposal forward. And if we get that funding, I think that this can help us with engaging local groups and paying them to help us both figure out what the communities need and how do we get to them. So prioritize actions. We kind of developed a crawl, walk, run in terms of if we don't have the funding yet, maybe there's some things that we can start using economic development funds with the hope of getting reimbursement. So some of the things, ideas that you'll see in the walk and the run phase, they're not necessarily going to be executed, but we will start looking at what the prices are. And hopefully if we get the CARES Act fund, we will be able to implement them. The crawl part is what can we do immediately and at the moment? So we have the idea of bilingual lawn signs. We'll be putting those out at the mobile parks and apartment homes for the NOVID app, both in English and in Spanish. Targeted Facebook ads. When we spoke with George Carrasco of Youth Services, one of the things that he said is that Facebook is maybe not having broadband, but people might have access on their mobile phones. So we'll develop a plan to promote some of the key programs, the Promise, the NOVID app, the Connect program in Facebook ads, as well as maybe on Facebook bulletin boards. I think we could also bring in a guest speaker to speak with Mayor Weber, maybe somebody from La Familia. Then we can go, so this is an overview of what some of the flyers and the Facebook ads might look like. But of course it would be in Spanish. Bilingual NOVID flyers. Again, we've already started handing some of these out with some of our partners that we've used, particularly the food security partners. And then here, Erminia is going to speak to a really exciting program.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for allowing me for this time to present an update on our current projects. Arts and Culture is working with Mountain Mover Media to produce a public service announcement or a PSA video in response to COVID-19 and based on the city's I Promise campaign, to encourage residents and also visitors to use safety practices while out in the community and engaging with others, including multi-general households, and just CSP tips for keeping families safe, trying to remind them about your, abuela who may be living with you or in close proximity and how to keep them safe. Our target audience is Santa Fe City and County residents. Our PSA will feature local singer and comedian Carlos Medina, who will incorporate 4 to 5 different characters, those which he is best known for, and to throw in humorous statements in between. For example, I used to wear my bandana on my head, now I wear it over my mouth. These, as well as other statements, will be included in the promises outlined in the I Promise campaign, as well as a montage of hand hygiene techniques, followed by each of these characters walking out the door, putting on their masks. These will just be a quick and easy, fun reminder for those. This will be filmed at 6 locations within the city limits, including local businesses and parks. Shooting is currently taking place this week, so the week of August 17th through the 21st. We expect to have a preliminary video available to us by Monday, August 24th. And we will be including English and Spanish versions, as well as working to use local radio station time slots.
Thank you, Armenia. And I think if we decide to get, one of the amazing things about what the Arts and Culture Group did was get donations from the Century Bank, and then they matched that. And hopefully, if we get the CARES Act funding, we'll be able to expand on this program, and we think it'll be particularly culturally relevant. So from there, we're going to go into the walk phase, which at the moment, it will not necessarily be implemented in 2 weeks, but in 2 weeks, we will start going forward with it. So some of the ideas is really create this task force, as I mentioned, of local group leaders and how we can remunerate them for them to conduct a focus group, maybe give us a flash report on what kind of messaging that we should be elaborating. Another idea is just simply taking the information that already exists with the New Mexico Department of Health. It doesn't exist in Spanish, but we would like to create kits that maybe have the face masks, the Connect program, disinfectants, and go out to the mobile parks and canvass the areas, again, hopefully with the help of our local groups, community groups. Email packets. So if we actually do create these packets, then maybe what we can do is then have an email PDF version that other people might be able to share. The counselors might be able to share with their constituents, maybe local groups. We can reach out to Tierra Contenta for their email group as well. From there, one of the things, as I said, we need to target youth. So signage in parks, as you can see, there's an image here John Munoz did over at Alto Park. We would like to do that specifically with parks that are much more in that area, as well as putting posters over there in the park areas to really promote the distancing and to encourage distancing visually. One of the things that we've also said is maybe we could leverage our utility. We can put a message on there in the utilities bill, the Department of Health and Transportation. Sometimes what we see are those big signs with their much more with electric signs. Maybe we can create magnetic signs to go on city vehicles that we would put as well. And so some of these, as you can see, we don't have these costs or the timings quite yet. And again, because these are only just initial ideas. The third week, which would be run, and also we would be asking the groups, the community groups, to be meeting on a regular basis, similar to what we've done with our food security groups. And then at the 3-week point, we would start, maybe we'd have, and what we've done in the past is we've done webinars with Somos. So I think we would brainstorm with them. They're 15-minute webinars that we do via Facebook. And they also have a radio program that we might be able to use for outreach. And we'd see from the focus groups what would be the most relevant topics to really do the webinars on. Bus advertising, again, we'd have to look at what the cost would be and if we could target them for that specific area. Then some of the other ideas that have come up is text messaging and maybe getting text messages using phone banks. Somos has a strong phone bank system, and if we would have alerts for people to sign up for different things. And once we get further into it, and I think because of the lack of resources that we speak about there, we might want to bring things to them. So whether we ask the Food Depot, how can we bring the food to people? Do we need to bring COVID testing to people? Somos has had some success doing that. Do we need to provide childcare services, grocery delivery? Is there some way, and we need to provide the information to what do you do to quarantine? And if somebody is something happens. Again, that's really the New Mexico Department of Health information that I think we can turn into a booklet. And again, as Armenia spoke about Carlos Medina, I think that's particularly relevant, and we would look to expand his services if we got the funding. And I will stand for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. And you moved right through it. Councillor Cassett Sanchez, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Liz, for that presentation. I had a couple questions about, well, first of all, I'm really happy to see a lot more materials in Spanish. That has been a need that we have, I mean, even prior to COVID, that we really have not been meeting. So I'm glad to see that we are doing it here, and I hope that we need to keep doing this beyond just COVID in general. This needs to be something that we move into. I know that we had a lot of conversation with this during, not a lot, but we did discuss this during our budget hearings and identifying funding sources for interpretation and translation. But so thank you for moving forward with this. You had mentioned the 87507 zip code, which is a pretty large zip code. I know it covers both my district and Council Rivera's district. And I know you mentioned Agua Fria Village, which is, you know, a small section of it. Did they dial down into census tracts in order to be looking at where they're seeing hotspots, or are we really just looking at the zip code?
They did not dial into specific. I think Agua Fria Village was as specific as they got. We can definitely do a follow-up with the Department of Health. I think that the one thing, the difference between the 505 area, which wasn't necessarily as spiking as quickly, but it is also spiking, is that the 87507 is much more of the vulnerable communities. And I think for us, though, the work that we want to do, and maybe this is the beginning, and hopefully with the focus groups, we will also learn not only how it is that we can do for COVID, but in the future, because they're vulnerable for all sorts of future occurrences that could happen, as I mentioned.
Yeah,
Which I
absolutely.
didn't know that until I worked with the Department of Health, and they were like, yeah, you don't realize, like, this is not just like now that they're vulnerable. This is vulnerable in any moment. The first who are going to be the most susceptible if anything happens, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's, I'm not that we have hurricanes, but yes.
Anything, yes, that's absolutely true. That's why I was curious about the census tracts, because I know, you know, you were discussing a lot of the mobile homes and the large apartment complexes, which aren't, I do have some in my district, but that I know that I also have a large number of individuals that have been challenged by COVID that are not specifically in the mobile homes, not specifically in the large apartment complexes, especially some families that have, you know, older individuals that had bought their house a long time ago and are still there and are, you know, really experiencing a lot of challenges. And there's a lot of the intergenerational who maybe aren't necessarily living in the same house, but who are seeing their children. So that's why I was curious if the state, they very well may have that data dialed down even further. And so that just would be something that I would ask to take a look at, especially as we are looking at how exactly we target where's going to be the most bang for our buck. I think that would be important.
Well, I would definitely look at it and ask the Department of Health to look at it via census tracts. And I think that the main point they made is to target the vulnerable communities and those dense areas, the apartment buildings and the mobile homes. So at the moment, that's where we'll definitely start off. And I think we can expand from there.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure DOH knows where to be putting all the energy. And then you had mentioned that there wasn't as much knowledge on quarantine. Was that measured? Is that how we came to the conclusion that these individuals do not have the knowledge on quarantine? Because what I have found a lot is that, you know, doing work in public health, that there's often this initial push for, let's provide education on health. And you start that and people say, yeah, we get it. We understand that we should eat fruits and vegetables, but how am I supposed to afford them? And so there's often these much larger structural issues. So I'm curious about the quarantine piece too, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of other pieces besides just the knowledge of what quarantine looks like. So I was curious if that was measured, and that's why we noticed that is a something that we're concerned about.
No, it's not measured. It's not measured at the moment. I think that is actually just something that's speculative, which is why I put the speculations on the COVID. And I really think that we want to speak to the communities and get the input so that we understand that. I think that's just a notion that we have. And I think that what we do know that is measurable is when you have intergenerational families living in a small space, you may not have the means of where to quarantine. So when we speak about quarantine, it's where can you go, or where would someone go for quarantine, and also for us to understand if there are barriers of people saying, I don't want to quarantine, I don't want to be away from my family, in which case then how can we reverse those, or how can we supplement that knowledge, again pending on the funding.
Right. Yeah, that's just something I do want to be very cautious of, is I see this a lot in this type of work, is we move into vulnerable populations and there's this misconception that the knowledge is missing when really the resources are what's missing. And so I think that that'll be a really important question of what resources do you need to quarantine? And I want to make sure that that is not missed. So thank you. You mentioned canvassing. Is that safe right now? And how would we do it in a safe manner? Considering we don't, I mean, I know it's usually outside, very, minimal contact, but I'd be curious about what the plan for canvassing would be that would be safe for both the individuals that we'd be interacting with, as well as safe for staff that would be canvassing.
Agreed. I think at the moment, so what we did was with the businesses is just put bags. And so we would just be, it's not a door knocker exactly, but the idea would be to to create bags and these kits that we could deliver that handbook in, if we could get the free masks, if we get the disinfectant, and that would be kind of like the first, the low hanging fruit, although it's not that low, it still requires a lot of effort. And also I think, as I mentioned, so going up next week, we would speak to our community partners. And if they felt comfortable, we would then think of like, is there a scope of work? I do know that there are groups at the moment who are going out and doing canvassing and would like to partner with us.
Okay, wonderful. That's good to hear. I definitely want to make sure that safety piece is there. And as you mentioned, the partners, I know this was discussed earlier, but there's places that people are already going that they're having contact. And if we can minimize contact by utilizing those places, it's already helpful. So if people are going to the food bank, for example, and doing the pickups, if we can, be putting those kits there, or as partnering with the schools and the work that they're doing to make sure that they're getting resources to their students. Again, just how do we minimize the contacts in general is important, but glad to hear that it's more of a door hang as opposed to a knock and talk.
Hopefully we'll be able to see, but it takes a little longer. But we're looking into the broadband and seeing if we can bring it there. And if we bring, if that results, which Rich will talk more about that, then we would probably also leverage kind of that dual, like if something's already there as a resource that we're providing, then as a time, and also partner with our food security groups so that if they decide that they will deliver to these areas, then that can also be a double up. Can you also give the kits out?
Great, good, thank you. And then you had a slide that says, does the city need to do more for to generate equity? I would say that the question is not does, but how, because we know that that answer is yes. So as we're thinking about those focus groups, yes, we definitely need to be generating more equity across our city. And really that question is how. So again, really important thinking about that there is this piece of knowledge. I'm really glad that we are looking at this. I think that these are really important conversations to be talking about equity, both in times of COVID, but as you so aptly mentioned, that these are already individuals that in any situation, even in regular life, that there is always, one emergency away from complete and total disaster. So I really look forward to hearing more about those focus groups and really hearing what people are saying they are in need of and how we can be creating more equity across our city. And then you mentioned digital ads. I was curious what the age that we are targeting for the digital ads. You mentioned Facebook.
Yes, so we can target the area and the zip code, as well as we decided 13 to 65 plus, Los Milagros, Santa Fe, and 3 miles, which should have a reach of about 876 to 2.5 thousand people. When you buy the Facebook ads, until you reach that goal, the Facebook ads will continue going.
So you said and one of our target groups is the teenagers? Like
yeah,
13 to
we'll
18?
lump them all probably together into this is the age that we'll be doing.
Okay, I've been told
area.
by my very much younger, cooler cousins that Facebook is for old people. So if we are targeting, if we want to target 13 to 18, I know that there is a lot of research about what social media platforms are better for that. And I am not the person to spout those out and have any knowledge about them. But I think that the consensus has been that Facebook is where the old people are. And so if we're targeting teenagers, that is not the group. If you guys, when we get the Mayor's Youth Advisory Board running again, if you guys want to speak with them about how to reach out to their peers, I would be happy to help facilitate that conversation. Apparently Facebook is not cool. So it's just
Thank
good
you,
to know
Councilor.
for those.
Yes, we will take that into consideration. We'll ask constituent services regarding what media we have available to us. That would be most
On that
appropriate.
point, Liz, so Instagram, I think, is cool with the younger set, but it's also owned by Facebook. So when you buy Facebook ads, do you have to buy ads for Instagram, or because you're paying Facebook, do they decide which platform? I don't know anything about that. That just shows how.
So sometimes what you can do, Madam Chair, is if you have one and then it can pull, you can post in multiple places, even though you might be doing it specifically for Facebook. It can then also go to your other accounts, whether it's your Instagram account, whether it's a tweet message, and it formats it to those specific ones. So I can definitely see with, or look more in depth with our constituent services group that manages our social media.
Great. Councilor Casa Sanchez, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I didn't. Sorry, my child's upset. But I think those are all my questions. I just wanted to say thank you. I know that this is it's a new frontier for you guys to be taking this on, and I think it's really exciting, and you guys are doing a great job. And so thank you so much for this. And I actually think that there's going to be a lot of knowledge that we learn that we'll be able to see a lot more cross collaboration, as we were talking about earlier, between kind of our traditional public health sectors and how it intersects with economic development. So I'm very excited for what you guys are doing now. I'm also very excited for how that is going to move forward into the future. So thanks so much for all the work. I really appreciate it.
Great. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to staff for presenting the update. It's exciting to see what you're thinking about and reframing things. I like that you acknowledge that the Santa Fe Promise and moving in the more Spanish-speaking focus population, that totally makes sense to me. I think that's part of the reason why we had, even at the state level, we had some fits and starts of not really getting out the information about what was happening with the pandemic and the restrictions, and none of it was in Spanish. And they finally adjusted that at the state level with the governor having the interpretation happening simultaneously when they did the press releases or the press conferences. So I think that was good. And I love the idea of Carlos Medina doing PSAs. I think he makes it more, like you said, culturally relevant, but also kind of lighthearted, considering it's already a stressful situation to be in. And so I look forward to seeing those. Wanted to know more about I know about the clouds, the social distance creative markers for the clouds. And you said skulls, but I'm assuming it's like calaveras versus skull and bones. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilor Villarreal. I'm not sure what John Munoz has settled upon yet. It could be basketballs, it could be soccer balls, it could be, but the point is to be out in the parks and to get the messaging out there to young people. And obviously, if we get any of the material and the funds for Carlos Medina, so we can do appropriate messaging with that theme, that would be even more ideal for us.
Right.
So yes, we make calaveras.
Good calaveras, because skull and bones probably wouldn't be good in this case, for a pandemic. Just saying. I like the cloud idea that I haven't seen any yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to work. And then the text messaging I think we really need to expound on how that can work for us as a city. I mean, we use it for our emergency notifications and for recs. None of it's in Spanish. Although maybe there's a way to, actually, that's a question for, I'm not sure who, maybe for emergency management. I don't know if those messages come out in Spanish when we have emergency notifications on our system, our text system. So it would be good to see if that, for one, they come out in Spanish, and two, if we could utilize that text messaging for any like updates on COVID. I haven't really seen anything yet, so I think that would be good. Somos Un Pueblo Unido does a remarkable job with the use of text messaging. They have it down to a science, I feel like, and people respond quickly. They know when there's going to be announcements. They know about the testing. Somos got about 150 people this weekend to get tested. And then we had our own testing option for our city's staff. And I heard it wasn't like it wasn't a great turnout. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to make it less, I don't know, that I think there's somewhat of a shame factor that people don't want to get tested for some reason because they feel like they haven't been responsible, and that's not really the case, because people that are being careful are still, testing positive, and they're also working in environments as essential workers that they don't have complete control over. So I'm just curious, just throwing this out there about ways we could do better about testing. And if we are planning on doing any testing, city-sponsored testing, do you all know if we are?
Councilor Villarreal, as I mentioned, I think the focus groups will, one, be able to help us to find out what we can do to best get resources. Because at the moment we're like, oh, childcare, oh, grocery service, but that's just really being speculative. We don't know. So I think that we need to find out from people, and maybe it's not a city-sponsored activity. If the best way to go about it, and the people who have, and if people have more trust in Somos, or if they have more trust in the local organizations, or we are happy to capitalize on that and really use them, as opposed to necessarily us, who may not have as much experience. And so that's why we'd want to reach out to the different groups.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And utilizing our partners that already have that trust with the community members and their constituencies. And I actually do like the idea of canvassing. If we do it right, going door to door and actually talking to people and doing it from a distance. There were some people trying to sell solar around town in my neighborhood. They didn't wear masks. They didn't have any information to prove who they are. And I was just like, you guys got to leave this neighborhood, because it doesn't make sense to people what they're doing. If we had a canvassing effort that had like either partners that we work with, or even ways to show that we are from the city, and shirts, and then the bags and distributions actually say that it's coming from the city. I think that's a good idea.
Councilor Villarreal, I think you make an excellent point. I didn't even think about the badges. So I think that's actually then, again, something that we would want to partner with the different community partners who have more experience on this. So that would be, and then they have a great deal more expertise. And I think that we would expand our knowledge by working with them.
Totally. I think that's good. And then the last point I was going to ask about, I like the idea of the Novid app. And I was talking to Jennifer about this earlier today, and the idea is cool. And I'm like, all right, let's see how this works. But I think we talked about this, and it's only as good as the people reporting that have tested positive. So it's not like it goes into some kind of database and you actually know who's around you that's tested positive, unless those people have actually reported. And so again, it goes back to this, like, how many people would admit that they tested positive and actually go to download an app and say, hey, I tested positive, and I know it doesn't show them like who they are, but it does show the general area where they live. And so I'm just curious, do you all have any more information about how that's going to be not just relevant, but that it will actually be helpful for contact tracing? Because it's only, like I said, it's only as good as people actually self-reporting. So do you have any more info on that?
Madam Chair, Council.
Yeah, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, thank you. I can take that question. So there are a couple ways that we're figuring out how to do it. So with the Novit app, you can actually anonymously go get tested, and then the testing site, we're kind of working with the county, it's work in progress, but working with the county and DOH, you'll actually get a confirmation number, and you just put it into the system if you're positive. No one will ever know that you're tested positive, but you just put it into the system, and it'll then track you anonymously as this person is positive in your area, and Novit will tell you, one, how many degrees of separation you are from that person who's positive, when that happened, and then you'll have your own little dashboard that says, on this date, you were in this space, and 6 degrees of separation from you, someone was positive. And at the same time, we're trying to get Novit to work with the county, because the county does get stats, and the county could actually download those stats anonymously using special numbers into the system already. One thing about Novit app is that it doesn't need to be 100% participation. It could really be 10%, or well, actually we want 10 to 20%. It just gives a sense of a critical mass that shows what's happening, and it becomes viral after that point because you see how active it is. If you're out and about, you can see kind of what's happening. And I tell people it's kind of like an early warning storm radar. So it basically just tells you, you're now in a radar system where there are thunderclouds ahead and you need to be prepared. And so that's kind of what the Novit app does. On the back end, it just provides data to help us understand zip code, census tract, et cetera, where cases are and where people are that are negative and where they congregate.
Good. That's good to know, because I always kept thinking if a person were to test positive and they're having to go through that process, that would be the last thing to think about. Like, oh, I need to download this app and tell people I've tested positive. I mean, in the system with your number, but still, just like the fact that you said they're able to do it anonymously through DOH sounds more realistic to me. So thanks for the information on that. And I guess just wanted to echo what my colleague, Councilwoman Cassett Sanchez was saying, and how important the equity piece is, and the pandemic is really exacerbating the inequities that already exist in our community today and have been. So it's just another reminder that we need to do better. And now with the pandemic, we have to work even that much harder to be able to reach the communities that are typically and historically underserved. So thank you all for your work, and look forward to hearing more.
Great. I think that's all the questions the committee has on this item. Thank you, Liz, for the presentation and being here tonight and sitting through our meeting to get to your moment. Rich, I believe you were going to talk to us about a very important topic as well, having to do with broadband access and in the city of Santa Fe, which was relevant and is becoming more and more relevant as we all spend more time at home and on our devices. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Council. I hope you can see my screen. So I know we're at the time point, and I want to be respectful of your time. And I have a couple slides just to talk about current state, what we're doing in sort of our phase 2, and then answer some of the questions that were submitted, and then be open to any questions around broadband. So just like our Novit and our Santa Fe Promise, the broadband initiative has been going on, but once the pandemic hit, we started to put activities in place to sort of build some equity, build some access to those who didn't have access to broadband and internet, and sort of bridging that digital divide. And we're trying to get it so that by the time school start, people who were either going to school or people who were looking for jobs had a place they could go to use broadband to find more information and also to distance learn. So this is what we currently know. And recently there was a Science, Technology, and Telecommunications Committee meeting with the Senate just this past week. And so they were saying between 13 and 20% of New Mexico's homes do not have broadband access. And then we lag behind the nation. Right now, New Mexico's at 77%. I'm trying to get that figure locally and in the county's standpoint so that you can get a sense of the data. So the next time I talk about our update, I'm hoping to have a little bit more detail. Some of the goals and objectives we have, as I said, broadband and the initiative has been around for a while, but as the pandemic hit, we sort of pivoted to how do we address, I also now think of it as a determinant of health, is having access to digital and broadband access. So we've been partnering with the schools to launch our Wi-Fi spots, and thank you for your vote to get that out there. They are now up in 10 locations. And then we're also working with our community partners, addressing some digital divide issues in the Southside locations, mostly in districts 3 and 4. And we're trying to, after that, build kind of a post-COVID network. We see a couple places where there is some low spots. The east side, there's some hillside in the east, hillside areas that don't have any really good broadband. And so in the midterm, we try to figure out how to do some point-to-point networking to get some broadband out there, because a lot of people are working remote. And I do get some anecdotally, I get phone calls from people saying, can you help me? Because my Comcast, it keeps pushing out, or Comcast doesn't go this far, or it's gonna cost me $500 to put Comcast to my house. So we're working through those two areas, the districts 3 and 4, and then ultimately we want to get to the east side site, and then 10-year plan, looking at if we can bring on a telecommunications architect, that we look at a 10-year plan where we put in just fiber throughout the city and then sort of share it down. The city can sort of push through and help build with competitive prices, but also know that there are areas where we will have to support those neighborhoods so that they have equity in broadband reach and access. I wanted to share our team of collaborators, our city staff. There's a big team and it's cross-department. Then also externally, we're working with the public schools. We're working with the Department of Information Technology, and we're also working with community partners in both districts 3 and 4. So we have a really good team that's helping us look at the current state, what we've done currently, and then what we're happening to do with some of the issues we have with broadband in some of the underserved areas in District 3 and 4. So phase 1, I talked about 8 schools, 5 city locations. They're up and running, high-speed internet. Here are some of the locations that we've put in. We just added the teen center. So that's another spot where we have a broadband location. And as of this week, the week of the 10th, I'm sorry, we had about 742 total logins, which tells me that it's starting to grow. And so ultimately, you're gonna probably get a sort of a bi-weekly update on sort of digital access. And you'll see a slide that I show kind of a graph that we've been building, talking about adaption. And this graph is the one that I mentioned, that you can see by week when we launched it and now where we are. So the week of the 10th, 16th, we're now total connections 742. And you can see our unique users changing from 250 to 396. I think that's going to grow once, you know, folks are looking for jobs, folks are, you know, going to school parking lots and doing distance learning. So we'll see a spike as school starts to get further into play. And we're going into phase 2, and phase 2 sort of involves the sort of a pandemic response. So it's a work in progress. We've been, as I said, working with our local community partners, and that's in districts 3 and 4. And I'll have a map showing where I'm talking about, where it's hoping to install point-to-point backhaul. It just means we're going to put antennas to make our big, huge Wi-Fi antenna, which is over by the police academy, to extend out to the districts so that they can have the same type of high-speed internet that we have in most parts of the city. And then we're working with the public schools to sort of extend internet capabilities for the first semester. There are a lot of kids that are in school now, kindergartners up to 10th grade, 12th grade. And so we're trying to work with them to figure out some solutions. So there, as Liz talked about earlier, that crawl, walk, run. So we're looking to help work with them to figure out a crawl strategy. And then from there, we will work into the walk and run spot, where we will start to put antennas in some of those spots so that it's easy access for them, because some do not have cars. Some can't drive to the local schools, even though there are local schools within, you know, a mile of where they live. So the public schools has some ideas around MiFi gadgets. They have distributed 350, and so there's 200 left. And so we're trying to make sure that they get specifically distributed to the students that live in those neighborhoods. And the public schools actually has a really cool heat map that shows where their students are as relates to an actual school. And so they're now doing the work of making sure that there is a MiFi in areas where we know that people need to social distance, people need to shelter in place. And there will be some virtual learning going on. Again, we're using these mobile home parks. We've talked to some of the community partners, and we thought, how can we sort of look at a broader initiative to sort of give some equity out there and cross that digital divide. And so there's about 8 mobile home locations that are very, very dense in districts 3 and 4 that will allow us to put some antennas there so that they can have internet access, free public internet access. It has a 300-foot range, so it will carry through the mobile home parks for the beginning. But in the long term, as we talk about, 10 years down, putting broadband everywhere, that's going to sort of solidify it. But in the meantime, in the medium, we'll be able to put these antennas up and be able to give them access so that not only will the kids have ways to do distance learning, but they also will be able to have adults and people who live in that neighborhood. We think this is going to cost about $250,000 over the next 6 to 9 months. We have about $100,000 remaining in our CIP fund. And so we're applying for CARES Act funding. And then I'm also looking at a grant for the EDA. And then we also will try to do sort of ICIP funding for broadband to replenish that number. So I wanted to give you some visuals so that you have a sense of what I've been talking about. So in District 3, you can see this map here. There are 4 top trailer park locations, very dense trailer park locations. There's 1,340 trailers in these 4 district areas, and we're looking at applying a Wi-Fi spot there in the medium term. In the immediate term, sorry, the school will put make sure that the kids have MiFi. They have this thing called Kajit, which is kind of a mini like a Wi-Fi router that will be able to sort of sit there for a while. But we're looking at, if you can see my marker here, there's a black spot here. This is Jaguar Road, and there is a large internet antenna there at that police academy. And this will be our point-to-point station where we'll be able to use antennas to reach out to these spots, giving them high-speed internet for the medium term until we figure out our full telecommunications plan. So these, so the circles here are the trailer parks, and then they're looking at there's some parks here we'd like to set up Wi-Fi so that for people that can, in those areas there, we'll be able to appreciate Wi-Fi. I think the Agua Fria Village is sort of over here a little bit, but they still have access there because there are some schools here. It's a dot there. These other dots are schools, and those schools already have Wi-Fi. So there is Wi-Fi in the neighborhood, but there are people who can't get to it. And so we're trying to figure out the walkability aspect where maybe they can walk to it instead of getting in a car or using public transportation, which is just as unusual sometimes when you need it. So we're trying to make sure that we can use the walkability aspect to it. So this is District 3. District 4, we're also looking at from that standpoint. There are 2 large major areas. There are 4 trailer parks here, and there are about 582 trailers in this area with homes served. And so we're looking at right now working with the public schools to make sure there's Wi-Fi for kids who are virtually learning. And then we'll also then set up our point-to-point and have the major buildings that are there and then use it for antennas. And I will send you guys a copy of this document as a PDF so that hopefully you can see it. Yes, there's a lot of maps here. Some of the questions that you ask, where is it difficult to access Wi-Fi? I've been sort of speaking to that. South Side District, East Side, it's up in the foothills area. That's more a convenience more than it is a need or underserved need. Is there availability of services? There is, all the above. Where's the access, where it is. Sometimes the ISPs or internet service providers look at it from a return on investment standpoint. And so what we're trying to do in our bigger plan is to push Wi-Fi out to neighborhoods so that people can have a public choice, but it also allows the ISPs to say, there's a now opportunity to sell services, but I got to be competitive. And so there might be a small percentage of folks who say, I'll take this higher speed Comcast brand or Plateau brand because we're offering 1 gigabit and they might be able to offer 10. So we're looking at that from a standpoint of how do we provide services out there so that we're not worried about a ISP or Comcast or AT&T saying it's just not worth it. I can't get my money back. So we're looking from that to build some equity in those neighborhoods. And then someone asked about where the service providers are. So I kind of listed out where all the, what I call ISPs in the different districts. To note that not all areas are served in these districts. They're there, but they're not 100% coverage. And what's interesting about these ISPs is that they don't share their maps. So we've been sort of doing kind of a sleuthing project to build an internet map to see where they are, where they start and where they end. And it's been a crazy course of activity just to try to build that out. So part of what this telecommunications architect would be doing is to create a sort of more robust app that we could put on our GIS so that we could plot it out, so that we know strategically where the need is, more than just having people come to us anecdotally to say, I don't have internet, and it's not just one person, it might be a critical mass. And then someone asked, are we up to date with our technology? We're definitely cutting edge. At that recent Science and Technology Committee meeting, we realized that Santa Fe actually is on the forefront of using broadband and extending and leveraging it out into neighborhoods. There are a lot of neighborhoods around the state that are not even thinking or investing in this type of solution and ideas or partnerships. So we're definitely working with our partners to make sure that we can get out to the reach. You know, we have our current locations, city locations and school locations, but we're now also reaching deeper into areas where they are underserved and knowing that they have issues. And the pandemic was a part of it. It's not reasons why, but the pandemic has really accelerated the need that they have. So we are actually working with DOIT, which is the Department of Information Technology, so that we can get some high-speed internet from they have a building on St. Francis that connects to this Jaguar Tower, and that Jaguar Tower will be our extension out to the sort of western sides of town. And then we're looking in the future to explore more money, as I said, with CARES and EDA, which is the Government Economic Development Association or Administration. And then putting in, one of the ideas we wanted to do was looking at doing a roving wireless installed community RV. So this RV would be moving from place to place on a daily basis, providing resources like not just wireless, but food or testing or counseling, etc. And so that's one of the areas that we are considering as we look into our medium and long term into areas that are affected by one, the COVID virus, but also that there is an underserved need that we may have been ignoring and that we need to do it in Spanish. We're also working with Cyber Mesa, which is our current vendor who manages our Wi-Fi that's at the rail yard. And they would be helpful for us as we look out at that East Side Hill location, where they would do some points to make sure that we get some broadband access for those folks who are working remotely and that have just difficulty getting some of the big major players to bring Wi-Fi to their neighborhood. Yeah, so we've talked about sort of the access of funds requiring additional $100,000 from the CARES Act, working with the public schools. We have to do another MOU, and then the RV van I talked to you about. And then one of the biggest things I think that the council can help in the process is that right now in FY21, we don't have an opening for the telecommunications architect, but I'm hoping to put it in the budget for FY22 so that we can look at our 10-year plan so that we can be on the forefront of broadband technology and cross further into the digital divide with actual fiber in the ground. And with that, I'm finished and open for questions.
Great, thank you, Rich. Really appreciate this. This is an area that I'm very interested in. We have always needed internet access, and I just think this issue is becoming more and more important because of the pandemic and as we do more learning and working remotely. Councillor Rivera had his hand up first.
Okay, yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brown, so you talked about some of the areas in District 3 or 4, and then you mentioned that there may not be enough money to be able to expand that. Can you talk about that a little bit more? What are we looking at? How much money?
Thank you, Councillor. We're talking about, ultimately, as we talk about that medium to long term, it's probably another $200,000. And I might be able to use some money from our current CIP funds, $100,000. And then we also have an enterprise fund that we might be able to temporarily take money from, because it's an economic development piece, because broadband's a part of economic development. We might be able to use that until we replenish it through grant money or CARES Act, et cetera. But we're now just pricing out what it costs to make sure that there is equal access of Wi-Fi in those neighborhoods. And so we want to get beyond the trailer park. We know there are other areas that are missing out, but that's what we think our initial investment will be. And so we're looking at all kinds of funding sources to sort of make it happen.
Well, I would appreciate that, and then just stress that, you know, a majority of the kids live in District 3 and 4, so this is going to be important for them. Councilor Cassis Sanchez mentioned that she had a meeting, I believe, with her teacher, or maybe perhaps it was the city manager. I had one with my grandson today, so we're going to be doing distance learning potentially for a while, so
Yes.
I think it's important. So help me here sort of understand, and again, I'm just not familiar with this, but I assume the infrastructure will be able to handle people working from home, all the kids going back to school, as well as kids going back to college or adults going back to college. That's a lot of people on Wi-Fi. I assume the infrastructure can handle all that.
Yeah, as Councilor Rivera, yes, thank you. The school system is kind of an intermediate sort of first semester issue we have. It's going to take us a while to get that, what I call point to point. That is a much more high-speed 10 gig service, and there's a range of 300 feet. So wherever it starts, wherever it lands, it's about a 300-foot range, and all the folks that are in that area will be able to enjoy the high-speed wireless. But we do need to get it to a much larger bandwidth, and so what we'll do is in different phases add more antenna locations so that you know, it doesn't slow down, because all of a sudden people on the edges are saying, I'm not getting anything. And everyone who's within the 300-foot range is getting, you know, 2-3 gigabits, and there's 1,000 homes that are using it. So this high-speed internet that we're talking about, that's coming from that tower and Jaguar, will be strong enough to sort of satisfy those locations that I mentioned once we start to put in that they call the point to point.
All right, and have we started thinking about, so potentially distance learning may continue right now past Labor Day or past October. So right now kids can walk to the library, walk to school, and have access to that. What's going to happen once it gets colder? Are we going to be in a better position?
Well, that's why we're in a go mode right now, because that's why we want to be able to get these point to points, especially in the trailer parks for now, because you don't have to leave the house. It's going to be strong enough in those dense areas where you could stay in your house and get a free Wi-Fi in that area. Additionally, you know, the school is thinking, oh, maybe we can get some school buses that aren't being used. We can park there. There's a lot of issues with that right now, but they asked if we could use the Kajits, which will kind of be a temporary solution for us. But as the weather gets colder, we're hoping that by the time November comes, we've actually put our antennas in, and they're enjoying Wi-Fi in those areas where they don't have to get out of their house. I mean, if they have a car, they can go to a school and use it, but it should be able to use in their area for that span of space.
All right, I'm glad you're thinking ahead, but when you talk about crawl, walk, run, I'm not sure we have enough time to crawl, so.
We don't, it's a go, it's all systems go right now.
Yeah, maybe
It's all
going,
systems go. Yeah.
we may be going into run sooner than later,
Yeah.
so. All right, thank you for your presentation, appreciate it.
Sure,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome, thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. And we are on, I'm not sure who was next, so I'm just going to take them in the order they come on my screen. Councilor Garcia, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Rich, for the thorough presentation. Just got a quick couple questions. There seems to be a lot of focus on District 3 and 4, and I see that you said that you're looking at Fort Marcy. Are you guys thinking about Midtown area? Because it can impact, you know, the District 3, I mean, District 4, District 2, you know, especially the Hopewell Man neighborhood. And I think we want to ensure that there's equitable services throughout the city, especially when it's critical services like Wi-Fi, because as Councilor Rivera noted, I mean, our teachers are giving us the kind of heads up we're going to be in remote learning all year, not just throughout these next 9 weeks. So they're prepping us for that. So I think we need to prep our communities and really look at how we can make the access in an equitable manner as well. I mean, I think the idea of looking at buses is a great idea, how that works, because you know, not every kid is going to want to be using Wi-Fi during the day, so to speak. I know that there's been that challenge where some kids are going to have to go to daycare because their parents are working, so they're going to have to go to school in the evenings. So I just want to kind of plant that seed that we need to ensure that there's equitable service 24/7 and not just, you know, primarily throughout the day. You shared with us data within the last month or so. Do we have data for the spring in regards to how much these newly installed Wi-Fi extenders were utilized during the remote learning that the students went through this past spring semester?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I'm going to answer your two questions in order, first and second. One, I brought up a great point about equity throughout the city. I'm also looking at this broadband strategy and plan through the opportunity zones. And so in the Midtown area, there are 2 opportunity zones, not just the campus, that's one, but in the Hopewell Main neighborhood, that's all opportunity zones. It's a perfect way for us to get grant funding through the federal government, because broadband is one of their initiatives, and also that it's because of an opportunity zone. So it's on our docket. We just testing it out on the District 3 area. Those precincts, there are actually 3 precincts there, really. That's in District 3 and 4, but there are a couple of precincts. So we're moving along. We want to get to the Hopewell Man area. So we will definitely be in that run mode. We're definitely putting it there. And actually it's closer to the high-speed broadband antenna, so it should be a little easier. So to that point, the opportunity zones are one area that we know we have to sort of focus on. And then 2, you asked about the data. And so the school and city locations didn't really come on until near the end of school, because we had some equipment waiting issues. And so we don't have data up to May because they were just starting up. So this is kind of the data that we have right now, and we're gonna, store it and share it moving forward. But because of some equipment issues, paperwork issues, it did not go live immediately in May 1, which I think May 15th was our start date, but we had some delays with it. So
okay. And I guess a follow up to that, just because they are being, a lot of these extenders were at schools, and they're probably, I would assume, the teachers and the administrators at the schools were using that Wi-Fi already.
Yes.
So if there's a way to kind of differentiate previous users and new users, I think that would definitely help, because I think that would change the numbers dramatically, in the sense you had teachers returning to schools last week, within the last couple of weeks, to get their supplies, whatnot, get ready to teach from home. So I'll be interested to know how many folks were using it before, what's the new usage, etc.
Okay.
But thank you again for the information, Rich. I really appreciate this initiative, and I like that we're looking at the high-speed, more so Ethernet access, underground cables, not necessarily Wi-Fi extenders. I know that there are lots of community concerns in regards to, extending Wi-Fi, especially 5G, through the air. And it sounds like through the ground is a much safer component, and I like that we're looking in that direction. But thank you for the thorough presentation. I really appreciate it, Rich.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councilor. I just want to add to that the data I have is a little bit deeper. So one of the data points I put on there was unique users. So we know the new users, but I do have some data that takes it per location. So when I share the data I have, I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. You can kind of see the charts that we've been building around unique users and each location. So you have that information. So, thank you.
Great. Next on my list, Councilor Cassett, sorry, Councilor.
Okay, it's a tough name. You normally get it right, which is impressive.
No, I know. Well, I trip over my name all the time, so I think that's a first on yours.
Thank you so much, Rich, for this presentation. And, again, this is just such a necessary work, as you said, something we should have done a long time ago. And I'm really glad that, there are some positive things that come out of this very less than positive situation. I had one quick question. I know for our students, they receive Chromebooks from Santa Fe Public Schools, but I know that there is still issues with people having access to devices. Most people do have a smartphone. I know that this isn't always the case. So I was curious if we've come up with any solutions for people who don't.
Oop, you went blank.
Oh, sorry.
You went mute.
Oh, sorry about that. My computer gets a little funky. So if for any solutions for people that don't have an internet accessing device, or it can be really hard to apply for a job on a phone. And usually people would have utilized our libraries potentially, but of course we don't have those available right now. So I'm curious how we're looking at this problem and how we might solve them. I see Councilor Villarreal laughing at my cat.
Yeah. I think your cat wants to hear the answer also. So thank you for that question, Councilor. Yes, so we've been working with the public schools, and they recognize that's an issue because they know that sometimes they give an iPad to an elementary kid or a Chromebook to a student, and their parent takes it because they need it for work. And so we're trying to figure out how to make sure that in the multi-generational families or families that just don't have those tools, how we work. And so I've been working with Kira Ochoa to figure out if in the community services side, how do we take on looking at finding funding so that we can help those neighborhoods with that. And so the Connect program, that's one of the things we want to put in there. Do you have access to broadband? Do you have access to tools? And so Connect will actually help us sort of pinpoint those folks who may not have the tools they need to succeed or to be informed. And so that's where Kira and I have been kind of figuring out beyond the schools what happens. The other thing we're doing is that the public schools recognizes that there are kids that don't have access, that we could they have these things called MiFis. So they give them the MiFi, and that gives them like a hotspot. And so they have 200 left, and they realize they haven't distributed them, and school's in progress. So we're going to do that sort of 1-2 punch where the school needs to do the MiFi piece, and then Kira and I are sort of working through how do we make sure that folks and families that don't have tools can get them, and then tie it into what we're doing to provide broadband access.
That's wonderful. I'm really glad that we are already thinking about that. One thing that actually came to mind was recently there was a group that was asking they needed laptops, and I have a hoard of old laptops because I never knew how to dispose of them in a environmental manner. And so that also might be something that, we could reach out to the city that, that people might have old devices that, might just be really slow or clunky, or maybe don't work for somebody who has to store a lot of stuff on their computer, but it could be a potential drive. We do food drives, we might do old device drives. I'm sure I still have more in my garage somewhere. So as we're looking for more resources.
On that point, Counselor, I do think there are folks in the community who do that sort of stuff. So we might look at partnering.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes you need to also, refurbish and wipe the computer and do all the techie important things. So I think that would absolutely be a worthwhile partnership to pursue. That was all. Thank you so much, Rich.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Just a couple of things. Rich, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for being here. It's very timely. I did see the article in the paper about the Science and Technology Legislative Committee that also looked at this. Do you have that presentation, that report that was given to them?
I think I do. I think I do. I'll make a note. I think that I was able to get a copy.
Yeah, if you have a copy, maybe you could send it to the committee. That'd be great. I'm gonna yield the floor right now to Councilor Rivera, who's waving his hand and has something else to tell us.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just on Councilor Cassett Sanchez's point, as I sponsored a resolution several years ago that asked for the city, with all its used laptops and used desktops, that they would clean them up and then donate them to needy families. So there's a resolution out there that allows for that. There wasn't much of a need for it back then, as much as I thought there was, but perhaps now with COVID, there's much more of a need to get those out. So if Rich wants to look into that, that may be a possibility as well.
Sure, thank you. Larry.
On that point, Madam
Yes.
Chair,
Yes, Councilor Villarreal.
they actually had been talking about that, or when I was on SWAMA, the Solid Waste
Mhm.
Management Agency, because of the day when people drop off electronics. They were trying to work with a third party to figure out how they could support by wiping them out and then being able to reuse them in the community. So there's an effort, and I would probably talk to, I'm too tired.
Charlene.
Charlene might know, but actually I'm thinking of,
Randall.
thank you, from SWAMA, the director of
Randall?
SWAMA.
Okay, yes.
So-
Randall Kippenbrock.
There you go, Randall Kippenbrock. He would know just where they were at with that, because there was a group, whether it was nonprofit or for-profit, that was trying to figure out how they could intersect and support that effort to be able to reuse electronics. So just an idea.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Councilor Rivera, do you remember what year you carried that resolution? We'll go back to him. Well, there he is. Sorry.
I don't. I want to say probably 2014 or 15.
Okay.
So it's been a little while.
Okay. Just, I think sometimes that's helpful in terms of.
1974.
Yeah, in your first term, 1974. Okay, we've got one more presentation, but I do have a couple of things. I am very interested in this fiber infrastructure. It is the future. We've got to get it. And I'd be interested in talking to you about future presentations for this committee, about what that costs, how we go about that, how we start to plan long-term for that, whether 10 years is too long. We may need to do something sooner in that area. So I just want you to know that I'm very interested in getting the fiber infrastructure started. And I'm also interested in, several counselors talked about equity, and part of what piqued my interest about this, of course, is just, I've gotten emails from constituents, and then just my own struggles with broadband, and then, talking to my kids and hearing what they have available to them by providers and what they're paying for it. So in terms of speed and cost, I mean, we are not there yet. We are paying far too much for far too little speed. And I don't know what we do about that, but I'd be interested in ideas on that. And one of my thoughts is to bring some of the providers before the committee and have them talk about their plans to generate access here. So heads up out there. This is something I want to continue to look at and hear more information about. Let's see. I think that was the only thing I would, word of caution, I guess, Rich, the east side and the foothills, you characterized as being convenience rather than necessity. And I would just ask you not to say that again, because we have many educational institutions in districts 1 and 2. And the importance is the same. We're all trying to live and work and go to school, no matter what part of the city we're in. And I think this is an important component for everyone. So just want to give a little word of warning there. All right, so with that, thank you, Rich. Really appreciate you being here. To be continued. Definitely want to hear more about that. And we will go now to our last presentation. Thank you all for hanging in there. Wanted to hear a little bit about the Slow and Quiet campaign that was recently completed, phase 1. So we have the Santa Fe Police Department here to talk to us about that. And since we put this on the agenda, we've moved into phase 2. I know we're all getting lots of emails from folks and about the noise and about mufflers and just the disruption all of that is causing. So really appreciate you hanging in there, Captain, and being here to provide some information about the first phase, and maybe you'll touch on the plans that are underway in this second phase. So thank you for being here.
Sure.
Thanks,
Madam
Rich.
Chair and councilors, so I have a slideshow. I'm going to try to share the screen, see if I can do that properly. I'll go through the slideshow. If any point you have any questions or want to stop me or whatever, you can feel free to. It's a fairly short slideshow, so hopefully we can keep the time down a little bit, but I will try now. All right. How is that?
Don't see anything yet.
All right.
Just a word of caution, close your text messages before you share your screen,
Yeah, we're on the computer, so.
unless you want to be famous.
All right. How about now? Can you see that?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, great. All right, let me pull that over. Okay, so a little bit of the background on the slow and quiet operation, the phase one. You can see there's a picture of downtown in the plaza area. Although it may have initiated there at the plaza area, it didn't stay there. I'm sure some of the councilors, you've heard your constituents complaining about muffler noise throughout different parts of the city. With that being said, it was initially in the plaza area and those surrounding streets. And the initial stuff was drag racing and mufflers as well. Sometimes they do go hand in hand. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes cars are just modified and they're loud mufflers. It doesn't mean they're necessarily speeding. So with that being said, staffing is an issue when it comes to issues such as the mufflers. When you look at mufflers, they are definitely a quality of life issue. People especially live downtown where it's an echo chamber, if you will. But with that being said, it's not a public safety issue. That kind of goes more into the speeding, the drag racing and that. So you have your quality of life versus the public safety. So in this case, we decided to go ahead and pull a specialized unit, and that was the DWI unit. And they began that on June 24th, and that ran till July 18th. So it was about 25 days. We also had our bike team participate. We couldn't have our bike team participate, all day long in it. They have their own function there at the plaza and keeping that area safe and responding to calls for service there. So, but we did pull them from 8 to 10 p.m., which it seems like in the later hours is when we're seeing the muffler complaints, especially when they were congregating and the drag racing was happening. The focus of the violations was speeding, loud mufflers, exhibition driving, the racing, reckless driving, pretty much anything that was dangerous. And that's also including all other forms of citations, running stop signs and things like that, but that was the focus. We also displayed, as far as public notice goes, and you'll hear me, talk about this a little bit later, about the kind of social engagement, putting the media release out prior to the operation, letting the public know, hey, this is the operation that we're going to be conducting. I think we even in the initial media release, we linked the ordinances to people can familiarize themselves with it, kind of give some information on the violation and the penalties and the fines. And then we put the message board downtown the plaza, kind of just reminding people that the drag racing or unsafe driving would be enforced. So a little bit of statistical information. I won't bore you with all the numbers, but there were about 477 citations issued citywide. This is also officers on their regular duty issuing citations to mitigate that overtime, since we did take a hit with the overtime budget being reduced, obviously, with the budget crisis. There were 477 citywide. There were 113 citations that were just directly downtown in the, if you will, the PDP loop, so to speak. Those covered everything from racing to reckless. There was, as far as speeding directly in the downtown area, there were 12 citations for that. And then citywide, there were another 97 citations for speeding that were issued. Mufflers, there were 18 citations that were issued. And there were, as far as the DWI unit, obviously they were the head of this operation. There was also 5 drivers that were detected and arrested ultimately for DWIs. I figured this might be something interesting. When we talk about the mufflers, how do we enforce it? Where is it going ultimately? How's it ending up in the court? So a little handy picture there is the municipal court. So I reached out to the staff attorney for municipal court, Chad Chittum, and just kind of asked him, where are these, since 2020, how many citations have there been out there for mufflers, and what's going on with them? Where are they at in the process? And you can see there, the 11 of them were penalty assessments. That means that the individual driving the vehicle took the penalty at the time of the stop, basically pled guilty and paid the fine. 3 of them pled not guilty, and they're pending the traffic trial. You have some no contest and deferred. There was a bench warrant that was issued, and there's also 11 that have not yet been arraigned. Those are primarily due to, from what I understand, the little COVID scare that happened at the municipal court. They shut down for a while, so it kind of pushed things back a little bit. So some other noted items, and just watching the other presentations that happened tonight and the discussion of Spanish speaking and bilingual things that need to be released to them, to the public. So the sergeant that's in charge of the operation, he's one of the department's paid Spanish speakers. So he noticed in a lot of the stops that he was doing, they were younger Spanish speaking juveniles. They weren't aware of the ordinance. So kind of going forward in the phase 2, we did that social media release again to put it out there. We did the first one in English. He is working on putting together something for either a pamphlet or something we can release that's kind of a bilingual that addresses it specifically. And he's actually the one that brought that up. So he's pretty excited to get it going. So in phase 2 began on August 14th, so roughly about 5 days ago, and it'll be active until September 18th. Again, just kind of taking that hit to the overtime budget and using on-duty resources to mitigate that overtime. We're going to be using on-duty resources for that, and you'll see the reference there. It says common days. Common days are for the police department are on Fridays, and it's basically where the entire staff for that team is here. So it gives us a little bit more staffing to address a little bit lower priority stuff as far as mufflers and stuff of that nature, for them to focus on that, assuming that calls for service, allow for that. The actual operation, I decided to go ahead and assign it to the graveyard commander, the graveyard lieutenant. The reason for that is most of these mufflers, drag racing type complaints happen around 8 to about 1 in the morning. So and that's the perfect time for when graveyard is out. So it covers that process. Still going forward, later in the year, we haven't determined when it will go into effect, the date or the term. Again, I know I'm going to reference this a couple of times, but that overtime budget, we want to keep that in and mitigate it with on-duty resources. So the term of the blitz, how long we're going to do the blitz, sometimes I think the blitz cost us upwards of $57,000 if we did as much as we wanted to do. But it's just not, I don't think, feasible this year. So when the blitz is going to happen, how long it's going to be, we're not sure yet, but it will be forthcoming at some point. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Great, thank you. We get a lot of emails, as you know, about this, and I thought it would be instructive for us all to hear a little bit about what happened in phase 1. And now, of course, we have phase 2. So I will take questions through the committee. Councilor Cassett Sanchez, your hand was up first.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Officer, for being here. You briefly touched on it, but I know that it's really challenging to enforce the mufflers, and I was hoping you could go into a little bit more information about that, because that's something that I'll get this from constituents, and they'll say, well, it's obvious when there's a muffler that has been modified. And can you explain a little bit more about some of the challenges that you all face when trying to enforce the modified muffler ordinance?
Real time, in that's one of the hardest things, is the real-time complaint and the violation happening in real time. As you can imagine, it's a moving violation. So when somebody, let's say, reports it on Camino Carlos Rey, or they report it on Cerritos Road, wherever it's at, by the time an officer gets there, sometimes the violator's already gone. Or in aspects of when they're hanging around downtown and they're kind of doing the cruise line, if you will, by the time a police officer shows up, or when a police officer shows up, they no longer are violating it because they either slow down, they don't rev their engine, and they're trying to stay within that, the parameters of the law. I guess if you could say, oh, there's a police officer, I better stop it. And it's hard to catch it that way. So that's probably, I would say, the hardest problem we have with it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's something that I've talked to a number of constituents about, that it is a very challenging one to catch in the act. So, do we have any further solutions on how we might be able to address this? I know it's gotten worse recently, but it's been pretty bad I live right off of Camino Carlos Rey and Rodeo, and so it's been pretty bad in that area. Governor Miles, I know, really gets a lot. Beckner gets a lot. And I noticed it prior. And so what are some of the strategies that we might be able to look at going forward, or what are some of just the resources that y'all need to be able to, I mean, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like we need more of you to be there to catch it. But are there other additional tools we might be able to use?
I mean, really the officer being there it's hard because of the real-time aspect, and it's even harder because to dedicate the officer to be there prior to, in other words, be proactively observing it, we have to be able to have available staffing for that. So that means that we have to dedicate personnel from that and stand away from the calls for service while we're dedicating that personnel to that. And just for reference, staffing wise, I mean, just for the month of July, I think we averaged about 9,000 calls for service. So you're looking at, and for August, we're already at about 5,000. So it's hard for the staffing wise. But going forward, that's still something as our staff comes in and we hire people. And I know Chief Padilla has a goal of fully staffing the department and patrol. And I know Deputy Chief Valdez is working very hard on getting it done and accomplished. So that's one part of it, just getting the staffing in. I know the technology will come and help us out eventually. When we get the cameras and stuff like that, those, they're speed specific, they're not necessarily for noise, but when somebody's speeding, that might slow them down. We do have other options as far as the speed goes in particular areas. Sometimes it's not always mufflers. Some people just complain about speed, and it just really depends on, like I said, they're not always intertwined. But we do have other options, depending on what it actually is. But outside of that, it's going to be police officer presence, but that incurs staffing, and then a little bit of technology help as well. And then I think really that public education, a lot of the people that were stopped did not know that was an issue. And you have to keep in mind that some people that are modifying their mufflers are spending an exorbitant amount of money and investing that into their car. And Santa Fe is known for cruising. So they like to cruise, they like to get out there, like to do that. And they may just pay the $81 penalty assessment to maintain their $5,000 investment, if that makes sense. So.
Yep. Yeah, that does make sense. I understand how that could occur. So, well, thank you. I do really hope that, again, I know this has been a broader conversation, but what can we be taking off your plates? And I know that's something that we're starting to look at, of all those service calls, how can we be moving them over to other professionals and allowing you guys to really be able to focus on some of this work that we know is really important. So I want to thank you all for the work that you've done on Slow and Quiet. I know that I had a constituent off Governor Miles who had mentioned that they felt that they were seeing some slowdown, and they had been noticed more traffic citations occurring, and they were very appreciative of that. So I wanted to pass along that thanks for watching that road. I know that one can get pretty quick and very dangerous. So we really appreciate the work that you've been doing on this.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry, taking notes. Councilor Villarreal, you had some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Captain Champlin, for joining us and sitting it out with this long meeting.
Sorry.
I really do appreciate the efforts, and it's kind of in my opinion, especially with the modifications of mufflers, it's not so much, I think it's a knowledge issue, but I actually think we should go to the source. And it's the car places that make this, that do the modifications, that we need to actually somehow not just inform, but tell them that that's actually an illegal, that it's against our city ordinance and that there is a city ordinance. And so that we let them know that this is not okay. And that, I don't know if you target the actual entities that do this, and they get fined. I'm not sure. I don't know what this, the right, like, I think maybe just educating first would be the first step, but I think we need to go to the source. Because if people are spending that much money, which I know they do, to modify their mufflers, then they should, the people that are doing it should know that this is not actually legal in the city. So I don't know if you have any ideas of how we could approach that. I don't know if it's really the police doing that outreach per se, but I do think that these car places need to know that that we don't allow this, and that we're going to start cracking down maybe at their place of business instead of targeting individuals solely. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Councilor Villarreal, we have had many discussions about mufflers and going from emissions testing like in some other cities to
Right.
checkpoints that we probably can't do, to different variations of what we can possibly do. It might be an idea. I know that I will have further discussions with Christine Mahalsik and Deputy Chief Joy, and as this goes forward, so it might be definitely something we can bring up. The hard part is that you have not just the muffler shops that are based here in Santa Fe. Some people install their own. That's a very common thing. When I was a teenager, I installed my own just for reference. So people aren't always going to go to a muffler shop to do it. And then what about we are built on tourism. That's what our city is. We want to bring people in to see our city. And with those people that come in and let's say they come from Texas, they drive a big F-250 truck and it's just a loud truck. How do we got to manage something there, and how do we enforce that with just the mufflers in general? Because we know that they didn't get it installed here. But it's always something that I think it's an outside the box thought that can be discussed.
Yeah, and I mean, I know that they'll exist, and that's not like the end all solution. I just think that having it happen late at night is the whole nother level of nuisance. So yeah, I still think that if we're doing some kind of educational outreach, that will maybe, I don't know if it'll help, but I think it's worth a try.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had about drag racing, one of the officers told me when I was asking them about the drag racing, how, and my colleague said, Councilor Cassett Sanchez said that where she was experiencing that, and I actually think it's every single major street in this city that we're having the drag racing issue. But one of your officers told me that you all have rules against actually stopping drag racers and cars that are going at high velocity because it's a safety issue for the streets and the community and also the officers. And so you've completely you have not continued stopping drag racers now because it's against some kind of policy. Is that true?
Councilor Villarreal, no. So maybe offline, you can email me and let me know the date and time that you spoke with the officer, and I can try to educate the officer a little bit, maybe misinformed. What they might be referring to would be something like a vehicle pursuit. So there are statute limitations, and we are very, very strict with the department with vehicle pursuits. So for instance, if somebody were, let's say it's 1 o'clock in the morning and somebody was going 60 miles, 70 miles an hour down Cerritos Road, and the officer attempted to stop them and they increased their speed to 80 or 85 miles down, going down the road, that might be a time where we stop trying to stop them because the possibility of them hitting a family down the road for just a speeding violation and us making that happen or being part of that for a reason that it happened and causing them to increase their speed to flee from us holds us in the city liable, and much less the horrible things that could happen to whoever they hit. Even the driver themselves, a young kid might get scared and take off, and we're not going to chase that kid, and he wrecks into a light pole and kills himself because he was just scared. So we are very strict on limitations like that when it comes to vehicle pursuits when a vehicle doesn't stop for us. But if we observe the actual violation in drag racing, we can attempt to stop it. It's just at what point do we stop trying to stop it.
Maybe that's what they were referring to, that there's a certain point that you can't continue pursuing a drag racer if they increase their speed. Is that the case? So if you see a drag racer and you all are in pursuit to stop them and then they increase their speed, is that when you have to like stop?
It's very, very situational dependent. I wish I could give you a blanket answer that covers it all, but the best blanket answer is when it becomes too unsafe for the public and that danger outweighs the stop and that danger the public does, then it's going to be called off. And it's basically terminating a pursuit. We have an entire committee that evaluates every pursuit that we do for that purpose.
Okay, so it's more complex. I guess I'm hearing it more in our neighborhood off of Sorios, like at between 1 and 3 a.m. It's bad. And so I hear it going, it's a lot of motorcycles too. And so I'm just wondering if the police are out there going, oh, we can't stop them, so we'll just let them go. And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out like the best way. It happens almost every night on Sorios. So I'm just trying to figure out a way to, if there's a trend you all are following, or if there's a way to like prevent that from happening. It's just, I don't know. I know you have to be in so many different parts of the city, but it seems like if Sorios has been the hot spot, wouldn't you want to just keep hanging out there in the middle during the graveyard shifts?
Sometimes the constituent complaints can come in from a louder group, and it can be misleading to where the data is actually at. Sometimes the data will point us to, I can tell you on Airport Road, we did a lot of speeding, proactive patrol response is what we call them, but where we put officers on Airport Road to get that down in areas like that. But just on Cerritos Road itself, it really depends. If we see that there's a speeding issue or a crash issue, I'll give you an example. When we do fall blitz, when we start to prepare and plan for it, we do evaluations based on data that says, where are the crashes happening at? Where are people getting hurt at? Fatal crashes, DUI crashes, all those kind of crashes. And where do we need to be at to save lives? Because that's the ultimate goal. So
I hear you. I guess what I'm hearing is people are speeding because they can, because there's very few people out on the street at that time, and businesses are not open, the bars are not open. And so that gives them at least they think, the privilege to speed down. And so you wouldn't see a crash on that area. So it's not going to be an area where you would do the blitz because there aren't crashes, because it's like the middle of the night and nobody's there, and that's why they know they can do it. So I feel like they know our system and they're working it. So I don't know what to say about that.
Right. I can tell you that we do enforce traffic up and down and speeding up and down Cerritos Road, especially Cerritos Road, Airport, Rodeo, all the main drags, if you will.
Okay. Well, you have a tough job, and I appreciate your team being out there. I just wish there was an easy solution. And I'm wondering if the other cities have the same problem right now, considering that the pandemic is hitting everybody. Have you heard anything anecdotal?
It's very interesting that you brought that up. I spoke with a gentleman today, Michael Collier from Flagstaff, Arizona. He called me because he saw our media announcement about our muffler enforcement for Slow and Quiet. He's a citizen, not a cop, in Flagstaff, Arizona. And he called to get what we were doing in our city, because according to him, and this is only according to Mr. Collier, that he can't get his city council or his police department, it seems like, to move on it because they're understaffed, they're too busy, it's a low priority. All those things are still, true even with us. But with that being said, he called to Santa Fe, New Mexico, because he saw our media release to say, hey, what are you guys doing about this? So that was interesting. That just happened this morning. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious if other cities are experiencing this. But thank you for your work, and thanks for joining us and giving us some information on the next phase. Have a good night, Captain. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilor Casa Sanchez for a second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Captain, I just had a really quick question. So I know there's kind of two groups of speeders. There's the speeders who are speeding for fun, and they're probably going to keep doing it. In general, do those displays that say, your speed is, and it blinks if you're going too fast, do those work in terms of kind of your regular individuals that just went too fast and had a lead foot at that? Not so much.
I think it does have an impact. I think it definitely slows drivers down. I know that we've used them quite a few times. Just one that comes to mind is up on Canyon Road, where it has people come around, they see the sign, and they slow down because it broadcasts their speed. Some people are going to just speed, and they don't care because they know that that little message board isn't going to give them a citation, and it doesn't have lights on it and a citation book, so to speak. But as a general statement, that's why we also use, the traffic calming vehicles and different things to try to stop that. So, but I believe it does have an impact.
Okay, thank you. I had a constituent asking about those the other day, so I appreciate the insight on them. That was all.
Councilor Cassett Sanchez, sorry, one more thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, you brought up Camino Carlos Rey. Right, so I talked to our traffic sergeant today because we were talking about those speed sign deployments. They're actually going out on Camino Carlos Rey tomorrow, so they're scheduled for deployment tomorrow.
That's really exciting. I have about 5 emails I could send tonight that would make some individuals very happy. So thank you for that news. I appreciate it.
Great. So just a couple closing questions. Of the citations you gave in the slow and quiet phase 1, do you have any sense of how many of those are out of town?
No, not offhand.
Is that data that you know, or is that somehow, is there privacy issues? I'd just be curious, like how many of them are?
I've never searched in a manner for that. There are addresses that are listed on a citation whenever the citation is issued. So it may be something that's searchable. Like if we put in let's say the city of Santa Fe, everything excluding that, but it would be probably a fairly difficult number to come up with.
Yeah, I just, it's my sense that this is broader, that what we're feeling here is not necessarily people from Santa Fe driving in Santa Fe, but probably coming from outside of the city. But I'm sure we have plenty of people who live here who are also partaking. I also think this is a problem all over the city. I know it's a problem in districts 1 and 2, as well, again, as in 3 and 4. I think anywhere you have interesting streets, whether they're long straightaways or have some curves, and they're unpopulated, to Councilor Villarreal's point, people are gonna use them as a racetrack. So I think the problem is pretty widespread. I'm curious how it works. So if an officer is out and you mentioned you have to kind of be there to actually issue a citation, and you have issued some citations, if you just hear the muffler noise, are you able to stop them? And then what happens? Do you have to inspect a muffler? Do you have to, I don't know, how do you go about giving a citation?
So the ordinance is very, I guess, permissible as far as the actual citing the violation. What it basically says, if an officer reasonably suspects that muffler is modified or louder than stock, that they can issue a citation for the purposes of having that individual come into court, or they can pay the penalty assessment because that's their option. But it could give the court the authority to order an inspection. So all the officer has to do is reasonably suspect that muffler is not in line with the city ordinance, and then they can cite that individual into the municipal court for further follow-up, if you will, or inspection. And that really depends on what the judge determines at that point.
Okay, interesting. And I guess, do you feel like you have, other than, it's a difficult situation, as you suggest, that you have to witness it, you have to be there. That's kind of hard to have the coverage. Is there, I don't know, is there anything we can do to be helpful? Like, do you need, I don't know, do you need the capacity to be able to cite the shops that are doing this? I mean, do you have laws that would allow you to do that?
I don't think there's any city ordinance right now. I could be wrong, but nothing comes to mind that says that it's illegal for a muffler shop to install an aftermarket muffler, if you will. I think it might get into the weeds slightly with how loud is that muffler, and the verbiage sometimes even gets a little difficult because the way that the ordinance reads is anything past stock. So take, for example, a Mustang. A Mustang has a loud standing growl just coming off the lot. They don't have to modify it at all.
Yeah.
So we cite that individual into the municipal court and they say it was stock. There's no shop involved in that. So could it be something like Councilor Villarreal mentioned, where that's kind of the outside the box? Can we address them, at least put something on the books that says that? Possibly. I don't know how that necessarily, I don't know how beneficial it would be versus the work that would need to be done with that, I guess.
Mhm. Okay, well, it's late, I won't belabor this, but thank you for your work. And I think, if you hear of things that other cities are doing that might help us address this problem, I think we'd all be interested in it, because again, we do hear a lot from folks.
I think the biggest thing for our agency right now is getting police officers on the street. That's the funding to get the police officers on the street so that we can, one, be as efficient as possible, reduce those calls, those response calls for service, and then be able to take on other little projects and quality of life issues like the mufflers and things like that. It really is a big issue when it comes to staffing.
Yeah. Well, and maybe more education, since you pointed out that some of the people you stopped didn't know. So.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you for hanging in there with us. I really appreciate it, and appreciate you being here tonight, talking about all the hard work you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right. With that, we will go. I probably am not going to go in the order of the agenda because I don't have it pulled up, but do we have matters from staff? Jennifer, is there anything?
No, Madam Chair, not tonight.
Okay, great. Matters from the committee?
Just one thing. That
Yes.
you probably already know. Can we please not have so many presentations stacked in one night?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, we're trying. So when we scheduled these, we didn't have anything on the consent agenda, right? So it's this balance, and then all of a sudden, all this stuff gets thrown on the consent agenda. We are working hard to make sure that you have meaningful meetings, and we are trying to balance the time. I hear you. It's too much. So, okay, anything else from the committee? All right, anything from the chair? No. And with that, I will call us adjourned. Thank you all, appreciate it.
Good night, everyone.
All right.